Chapter 2966. Swoosh. A blinding white light lit up the night sky. Two lofty figures, wrapped in white light, dashed out of the ruins and came to the night sky. They were two Sir God experts. One of them was a middle-aged man in crimson armor with dragon horns on his forehead. He was 30 feet tall and was as tall as a tower. He was surrounded by crimson fire, which showed his valiance and dominance. The other person was in a purple robe. His skin was as black as charcoal and his body was as thin as firewood. He was in a loose purple robe that looked like a bamboo pole holding up his robe. He looked extremely strange. However, he was surrounded by purple thunderbolts and his aura was mysterious. The two Sir Gods were from Hylin County and they were Sir God Haiyang's helpers. When they arrived at Green Summit Mountain, the two of them stood in the night sky and looked down at the battlefield. They saw that more than half of Green Summit Mountain had collapsed and all the buildings were destroyed. All the disciples and guards were dead. The two of them were shocked. Gosh, how did this happen? There was a problem with the teleportation formation. We were only late by a few breaths. How did it become like this? The two Sir Gods were shocked and in disbelief. The North Plains branch was more powerful than Hylin County and it had a monarch upper divine array to protect it. Even if a high-level Sir God had attacked, it would not have fallen so quickly. Moreover, the two of them knew that Sir God Haiyang was guarding the place. With Sir God Haiyang around, it would not have been defeated. When Green Summit Mountain collapsed, the teleportation formation was affected and more than half of it was damaged. Luckily, the formation could still be used. However, the process was slow and it took a few breaths' time. The two Sir Gods did not expect that Green Summit Mountain would be destroyed in such a tragic manner just by delaying for a short period of time. Thinking of Sir God Haiyang, the two of them looked up at the sky again. They saw that Sir God Haiyang was still fighting with Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was still the 10,000 feet tall god of war in golden armor and he looked holy and mighty. Sir God Haiyang was in a sorry state. He was covered in wounds and his aura was chaotic and irritable. It was to the extent that when he was beaten back by Ji Tianxing, he had no choice but to use his ultimate secret technique. Black smoke gushed out of his body, and his body turned into a pitch-black divine statue that was thousands of feet tall. This statue had 2 heads and 8 arms. It looked like a spider and was surrounded by black flames of death. He waved his arms with all his might, shooting out pitch-black blades of death, attacking Ji Tianxing fiercely. The two God Devourer swords had also expanded to a length of 10,000 feet. They danced in the sky, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate Ji Tianxing. However, the sky was filled with divine 5-colored giant swords, desperately trying to strangle him. All of his attacks were neutralized by the giant divine sword. Ji Tianxing swung the sword of burial of heaven and executed all kinds of sword Dao divine arts, beating him until he screamed and retreated continuously. After seeing the situation clearly, the two Sir Gods were filled with shock. Their expressions changed again. Who is that guy? How is he so powerful that he can force Monarch God Haiyang to retreat? God Monarch Black Flame is a high-level God Monarch. That person is even stronger, so he must also be a high-level God Monarch. However, which high-level God Monarch in the entire Bloodfire Divine Kingdom looks like that? The two Sir Gods frowned and pondered hard. Who exactly was the golden-armored god of war? However, they couldn't recognize him no matter how hard they searched their memories. At that moment, Monarch God Haiyang was sent flying by Ji Tianxing's sword. Black smoke spurted out of his body, and his injuries were even more serious. Seeing that the two Sir Gods were still in a daze, he shouted anxiously, "What are you waiting for? Come and help me kill him." The two Sir Gods came back to their senses and hurriedly took out their divine weapons, attacking Ji Tianxing from all sides. Although the two of them were middle-level Sir Gods, in terms of strength and status, they were lower than Monarch God Haiyang. However, Ji Tianxing noticed that Monarch God Haiyang didn't seem to be their superior. There was no sense of command in his words and actions. There seemed to be more of cooperation and alliance between the three of them. Ji Tianxing paid more attention and couldn't help but think, with the strength of these two Sir Gods, they should be elders in the Bloodsword sect. However, These two aren't among the 3 surviving elders of the Bloodsword sect. It seems that these two aren't from the Bloodsword sect. They might be from other sects. Surrounded by 3 Sir Gods, the pressure on Ji Tianxing increased greatly. However, he wasn't worried. He methodically defended and counterattacked. With the support of the Heaven-Mending Pearl and the 5 Elements world, he had inexhaustible divine power. He used all kinds of divine abilities and ultimate skills to fight the 3 Sir Gods without falling into a disadvantageous position. Moreover, the heaven-punishing sword formation was also operating to kill the 3 Sir Gods. Ji Tianxing was in an invincible position. He just needed some time to kill the 3 Sir Gods one by one. Soon, another 100 breaths of time passed. With the help of the 2 Sir Gods, the pressure on monarch god He Yang decreased by a lot. While besieging Ji Tianxing, he also found some time to take a breather and secretly take a divine pill to replenish his divine power. However, the hope that had just been ignited in his heart was once again extinguished. He originally thought that with the help of the 2 mid-level Sir Gods, he would definitely be able to kill Ji Tianxing successfully. However, reality proved that he had been too optimistic. The 2 sides fought for 100 breaths of time and exchanged hundreds of blows. He and the 2 Sir Gods didn't gain any advantage and couldn't cause any substantial damage to Ji Tianxing. Instead, he and the 2 Sir Gods were injured by Ji Tianxing's divine abilities and were exhausted from defending against the sword formation. As time passed, the 3's injuries worsened and their strength weakened. However, Ji Tianxing was still as vigorous as before and his divine power was vigorous and overbearing. Even the heaven-punishing sword formation didn't show any signs of weakening. Monarch god He Yang's heart sank as he gradually realized that something was wrong. At this moment, the 2 mid-level Sir Gods were sent flying by the dragon elephant divine fist and smashed into the ruins while vomiting blood. Similar situations had happened more than 10 times before and no one was surprised. However, this time, the situation was a little strange. The 2 Sir Gods were lying in the ruins and their bodies were twitching as they cried out in pain. Monarch god He Yang turned his head and saw dark blue smoke coming out of the 2 Sir Gods' bodies. The wounds on their bodies were spewing out a large amount of green liquid and it corroded the rocks until white smoke came out. The scariest thing was that their wounds were rapidly rotting and spreading, turning into terrifying bloody holes. Monarch god He Yang was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He exclaimed in shock, "What, poison? Are you poisoned?" Without a doubt. The 2 Sir Gods were in such a miserable state because they had been poisoned. Their blood vessels were corroded and their bodies were rapidly rotting. Their divine power was rapidly weakening and their fighting power was dropping drastically. However, monarch god He Yang couldn't figure out when the 2 Sir Gods had been poisoned. Just as he was pondering, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He lowered his head and saw that the wounds on his chest were also spewing out dark green liquid. The wounds were rotting rapidly and the flesh turned into black ash that scattered into the night sky. Under his astonished gaze, the wounds expanded rapidly and turned into huge bloody holes. Moreover, his injured arms were also rotting rapidly and dark blue smoke was coming out of them. I was poisoned too. There are 2 more chapters to go. Please understand. End of chapter. Chapter 2967. Sir God He Yang felt chills all over his body and his heart trembled. It was not because of the pain caused by the poison. It was because of fear. No matter how strong Ji Tianxing was or how magical the sword formation was, Sir God He Yang would only feel helpless and angry. But Sir God He Yang and the 2 Sir Gods did not know and were silently poisoned. Until now, he still did not know what had happened. He did not know when he had been poisoned. This was too horrifying. Ji Tianxing's use of poison had reached the acme of perfection. How could such an enemy not be terrifying? Puff, Sir God He Yang could no longer endure the pain in his organs. He opened his mouth and spat out 2 mouthfuls of black blood. He could clearly feel that more than half of his blood vessels had been corroded by the poison and he could hardly use his divine power. Even his divine soul seemed to have been corroded by the poison. His consciousness was blurry and dizzy. In such a situation, if he continued to maintain his divine statue form, it would only cause the poison to wreak havoc and his strength to weaken faster. So, he quickly returned to his original form. Swoosh! There was a flash of black light. Sir God He Yang returned to his original form and became a skinny purple-haired elder. However, his appearance was too horrible to look at. His body was full of holes and he did not look human. Hundreds of wounds were worsening and expanding. Green liquid and dark blue smoke kept pouring out. He quickly took out a few elixirs to heal his wounds and replenish his divine power. He released divine light from his hands and swallowed them. Eating the elixirs was too slow. He used his divine power to absorb the elixirs and heal his wounds quickly. Not only that, he also took out a few golden talismans and stuck them on a few critical wounds to prevent them from worsening. After doing all this, he felt more at ease. He stared at Ji Tianxing ferociously and roared with a hoarse voice, "Bastard! When did you poison us? I am a high-level Sir God and I am immune to all poisons. What kind of poison is this? How could it invade my divine body without me noticing?" If he did not figure out the problem, Sir God He Yang would be traumatized. Ji Tianxing looked at him calmly and said slowly, "That's right. A high-level Sir God like you is immune to all poisons. So, from the moment we started fighting, this monarch had already been using poison. This kind of poison was not violent, it would not take effect immediately, and it would not be fatal on the spot. However, it was most mysterious, silent, and undetectable. Furthermore, I've fused the poison into my sword Dao divine arts and sword formation. Every time you are injured, a trace of poison will enter your body. It's just a tiny bit of poison. Its power isn't obvious, so of course you wouldn't notice it. However, when you suffer too many injuries and the poison accumulates to a certain extent, it will erupt like a volcano and become difficult to control." Ji Tianxing didn't hide anything. He explained the process and method of using the poison. However, Monarch God He Yang still didn't know what kind of poison he had used. Since he didn't know what kind of poison it was, there was no way to neutralize it. Emperor God He Yang was shocked and angry. He was even more afraid of Ji Tianxing. "You vicious bastard. You are truly sinister to the extreme." It was one thing for him to be strong, but he was also so sinister, vicious, and scheming. This was what was truly terrifying. Sir God He Yang had to admit that he had already lost the battle. The destruction of the Northern Plains branch was already a foregone conclusion. More importantly, it was unknown whether he and the other two Sir Gods would be able to keep their lives. Ji Tianxing said with an indifferent expression, "Bloodsword sect has a blood feud with me. Since we are going to fight to the death, what's the point of talking about righteousness? Of course, we're going to do anything, isn't that so?" Emperor God He Yang choked and couldn't refute. That's right, Bloodsword sect did the same. If they could use the same poison to silently kill Ji Tianxing, Bloodsword sect wouldn't hesitate to do the same. Therefore, he couldn't blame the other party for being too despicable. He could only blame himself for being too useless. "Very good. Kid, you're ruthless and vicious enough. I'll remember you forever. I admit defeat in tonight's battle. However, don't be complacent. I'll return the favor tenfold and tear you to pieces very soon." Emperor God He Yang temporarily suppressed the poison and his injuries. He gnashed his teeth and left behind a few ruthless words. Then, he brought the two howling Sir Gods and flew towards the teleportation formation in the ruins. He didn't think of cracking the Heaven Punishment Sword formation and escaping. It was too stupid and might not succeed. Moreover, it was a waste of time. Escaping to Hylin County through the teleportation formation was the wisest choice. Swish! Emperor God He Yang stretched out his hands and picked up the two heavily injured Sir Gods. He flew towards the ruins as fast as lightning. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. "Things have already come to this, and you still want to escape? You're too naive." As he spoke, he used his divine thought to control the sword formation to intercept Emperor God He Yang. Swish! 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 Thousands of giant divine swords immediately sealed off the ruins and surrounded the teleportation formation. Emperor God He Yang's path was blocked and he had to use his divine ability to block the attack of the giant divine swords. He took out 4 dark golden runes and formed a law shield to protect himself. Bang! 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 Thousands of giant divine swords stabbed the law shield one after another, creating earth-shattering noises. The law shield was distorted and deformed by the assassination. Unable to bear the burden, it exploded with a bang. Emperor God He Yang retreated and was injured by the sword lights. Black blood splattered everywhere. He had no choice but to take out a purple-gold cloak to cover himself. The ancient purple-gold cloak was an upper-class monarch-level divine weapon from ancient times, and it had many functions. Although it was old and worn, many of its functions had been destroyed. However, its strong defense was still there and it could block the attack of the giant swords. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds rang out incessantly, but the purple-gold cloak remained unscathed and undamaged. Under the protection of the purple-gold cloak, Emperor God He Yang dashed towards the ruins and got closer to the teleportation formation. However, Emperor God He Yang had the protection of the cloak and he could block the attack of the sword lights. The two middle-level divine lords, who were heavily injured and on the verge of fainting, were tragically killed by the sword light. Their divine bodies were cut into pieces. After their bodies were destroyed, the two remaining godheads were covered with a layer of dark blue light. It was obvious that their godheads were corroded by the poison. Emperor God He Yang was shocked and furious. He quickly protected the two godheads and dashed towards the teleportation formation. Damn it! Even if their bodies are destroyed, I have to protect their godheads. If they were to die here, it would be hard to explain when I return. With this thought flashing through his mind, Sir God Black Flame worked even harder. He tried his best to escape. Under the protection of the purple-gold cloak, he passed through the attack of the sword lights and reached the vicinity of the teleportation formation. He was about to escape successfully. Just then, Ji Tianxing controlled thousands of giant swords and released dozens of nomological powers. He attacked the teleportation formation at all costs. Boom! 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 Countless sword lights rained down and hit the teleportation formation like meteors. There was an explosion of rainbow divine light and a loud bang. The already dilapidated teleportation grand array was blasted into pieces on the spot. It was completely destroyed. End of chapter. Chapter 2968. Sir God He Yang was dumbfounded. He had sacrificed so much and almost used all his strength to get close to the teleportation array. He was about to enter the array and escape the battlefield. In the end, Ji Tianxing destroyed the teleportation array at the cost of thousands of huge sword. When the array was destroyed, the thousands of huge swords were also destroyed. However, there were still 9,000 huge swords in the heaven-destroying sword array. Sir God He Yang's hope of escaping was extinguished. For a moment, he stood in the ruins, filled with despair and despair. Why? Why is it like this? 15 minutes ago, he had been hiding in the Green Summit Mountain, waiting for the disciples of the Bloodblade sect to die. At that time, he was full of confidence and complacency. How confident was he? But now, he had fallen from heaven to hell. Not only had the Green Summit Mountain been destroyed, but he had also fallen. He could not accept this result. He could not understand how Ji Tianxing could be so powerful and ruthless. He turned to look at Ji Tianxing and roared with a twisted face and resentful eyes, "Tianxing, do you really want to kill all of us and not leave any leeway?" Ji Tianxing stood in the night sky and looked down at him indifferently. He said coldly, "Before the battle, I said that no matter how many people from the Bloodsword sect come, I will kill all of them. Since we are like fire and water and must fight to the death, you must die." Sir God He Yang trembled with anger. After hesitating for a moment, he could not hold back and roared, "Do you know that if you really kill us, there will be no chance of reconciliation? You will offend two sects at the same time and will fight to the death. From now on, you will be enemies with half of the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. There will be no place for you in this world." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "So, you admit that the two Sir Gods are not from the Bloodsword sect? Tell me, which sect are they from?" Sir God He Yang thought that he was afraid and felt a little comforted. "Ha ha! This is a secret between our sect and that sect. How can I tell you? If you know what's good for you, then let me go. That way, you'll only offend the Bloodsword sect, and won't form a death grudge with that sect. Ji Tianxing revealed a playful smile as he jokingly said, "In your mind, that sect is extremely powerful, far surpassing the Bloodsword sect, right? Because of this, you treated that sect as a life-saving talisman. Are you hoping that this monarch will refrain from shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vases and let you live?" Sir God Yang didn't defend himself. It was a silent agreement. Ji Tianxing continued, "Although there are 6 great sects in the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom, there are differences in strength between them. The Bloodsword sect and the Bloodblade sect were both ranked at the bottom. Now that a battle had broken out, it would be no different from a chicken pecking at each other. Even the evil Blood Palace is more powerful than you. Therefore, the 2 Sir Gods must have come from the first 3 sects." Sir God Yang creased his eyebrows and held back his urge to speak. Because Ji Tianxing's analysis was completely correct. Ji Tianxing thought to himself, the top 3 sects are the 4 Symbols sect, the Heavenly sect, and the 1000G sect. Ning Qinggang once vaguely reminded me that the 4 Symbols sect seems to support the 3rd prince. If I run into trouble, I can ask the 4 Symbols sect for help. Since the 4 Symbols sect is excluded, only the 1000G sect and the Heavenly sect are left. Thinking of this, he had a general answer in his heart. If I'm not wrong, the 2 Sir Gods must have come from the Heavenly sect, which is ranked first and the strongest sect, right? Ji Tianxing said playfully as he looked at Sir God Yang with a faint smile. Sir God Yang's body suddenly trembled as a look of shock flashed across his eyes. He couldn't believe it. In order to save his life, he only mentioned that the 2 Sir Gods were from another powerful sect. He used this to threaten Ji Tianxing not to offend the 2 sects at the same time. However, Ji Tianxing guessed the answer with this clue. Such thoughts and wisdom were terrifying. Sir God Yang was silent for a while and said seriously, "Tianxing, I have to admit that your power, means, and scheming have impressed me. Since you're so smart, you should know how to choose. I'm not afraid to tell you that the sect ranked first is only the tip of the iceberg. The real power behind it is beyond everyone's imagination. Even the royal family of the Holy Kingdom is afraid of it and doesn't dare to provoke it. As for the rest, you can figure it out yourself." When Sir God Yang said that, he didn't mean to show off. There was no other reason but because he didn't dare to, because he vaguely knew some inside information and he knew how powerful the sect was. Hence, when he mentioned the sect, he had to maintain a respectful attitude and he didn't even dare to assume the power of the sect. After Ji Tianxing heard what Sir God Yang had said, he frowned and thought for a while. Seeing that, Sir God Yang was more confident and confident. However, to his surprise, Ji Tianxing actually refused. He shook his head and sneered, "Sir God Yang, you don't know my nature. I only follow my heart and do whatever I want. I've never been threatened. Not by the royal family of the Holy Kingdom, not by the 6th sect. And you don't have the right to threaten me." As he spoke, he slowly extended his right palm and there was a mysterious golden light accumulating in his palm. "If I want you to die, you have to die. No one can save you." Sir God Yang's face suddenly changed and he roared in disbelief, "Be ****. You're digging your own grave by being so stubborn. Even if you're a high-level Sir God, you'll die without a burial place. Are you crazy?" Sir God Yang was completely flustered. He couldn't imagine how arrogant and crazy Ji Tianxing was. He had made it so clear. Why wasn't Ji Tianxing afraid? However, the question was destined to never be answered. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing waved his right palm and there was boundless sacred golden light. It turned into a sword that could split heaven and earth and slashed at Sir God Yang. This golden light was very special and mysterious. It didn't belong to any divine power that Sir God Yang knew of, but it had supreme divine power that was superior to all other divine powers. The golden light was condensed and it was illusory. Time, space, and other divine powers couldn't stop it. Sir God Yang was terrified and his soul almost left his body. He performed a forbidden unique skill with all his might and took out all his divine weapons and treasures to block the attack of the golden sword. But it was all in vain. The sacred golden sword pierced through the night sky as though it was nothing. It passed through the divine skill lights and a few divine weapons and hit Sir God He Yang. Swoosh. There was no dull explosion but only a soft sound that sounded like space being torn apart. Sir God He Yang's divine body was smashed into pieces by the sacred golden sword. It turned into billions of dust and dissipated in the night sky. Even his greyish-black divinity was split into two by the sacred golden sword. Then, the dazzling and sacred golden sword light disappeared in the night sky. The universe became dark again and everything returned to tranquility. Chapter 2969. Even though God Lord Black Flame had been famous for over 10,000 years and was a high God Lord, even before his death, he didn't know that the divine golden sword that killed him was called World. That's right, it was the power of the five elements world. A divine sword condensed from the light of the world could naturally surpass all kinds of divine power. The battle was over. The dust and divine light that covered the sky gradually dissipated. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and removed the heavenly punishing sword array, causing all 9,000 sword lights to disappear. Green Summit Mountain had been completely destroyed, turning into a 300-meter-tall ruin filled with dirt and rubble. Around the ruin, several hundred miles of land was filled with deep pits and ravines. After this battle, the Northern Plains branch had been completely destroyed. More than 20 disciples of the Bloodsword sect, 3 deacons, and the Right Protector, God Lord Black Flame, had died on the spot. More than 2,000 vassals and several hundred guards of the Bloodsword sect had also been slaughtered. Such a shocking accomplishment was enough to shake the entire Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. Ever since the Bloodblade sect had declared war on the Bloodsword sect, they had attacked several branches, but they had never achieved such a valiant feat. Ji Tianxing didn't feel happy or proud, and his reaction was very calm. It was as if he had done something insignificant, and all of this was to be expected. However, the fourth elder of the Bloodblade sect and the 40 or so disciples who had survived had personally witnessed the entire process. Now, they were all shocked to the extreme and fell into a daze for a long time. After a long time, the fourth elder and the disciples came back to their senses. They all flew toward Ji Tianxing in the night sky, letting out cries of disbelief. This is too inconceivable. This is simply a miracle. In just 45 minutes, he flattened the Northern Plains branch, killed more than 3,000 people, and even killed the left protector of the Bloodsword sect. This is the most glorious result our sect has achieved since the start of the war against the Bloodsword sect. Young Master Tianxing is mighty and domineering. This disciple's respect for you is like a surging river. With young Master Tianxing's help, our sect is like a tiger that has grown wings. This is a great blessing. No wonder young Master Tianxing is so confident and lawless. It's because he has the qualifications. Yes. An expert like young noble Tianxing is enough to look down on the entire Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. No matter how arrogant he is, it's only natural. Previously, we had some misunderstandings about young Master Tianxing. That was because we were blind and ignorant. Fortunately, young Master Tianxing didn't bicker with us. Otherwise, we would have turned into ashes long ago. Many disciples of the Bloodblade sect believed in the strong. If Ji Tianxing did not have much strength, but was very arrogant, then he would be the target of public criticism. However, his strength was unparalleled, and everyone had seen it with their own eyes. No matter how arrogant and overbearing he was, it was only natural. That was confidence. Soon, the fourth elder and his disciples arrived near Ji Tianxing. Everyone bowed in unison, expressing their heartfelt gratitude and respect to him. Young Master Tianxing, thank you for saving us. We owe you our lives. From now on, I will follow your lead, and I am willing to be your lackey. The fourth elder completely let go of his pride and dignity. While thanking Ji Tianxing, he didn't forget to flatter him. Many of the elite disciples also praised Ji Tianxing, expressing their warmest respect and gratitude. There were even more than a dozen martial arts disciples who had become Ji Tianxing's loyal fans. They supported him unconditionally, the most brainless fans. Originally. Tonight, the fourth elder and the Bloodblade sect's disciples were on a mission. Ji Tianxing was only there to supervise the battle. However, the situation was full of twists and turns. In the end, The fourth elder and his disciples were hiding on the side. Ji Tianxing bravely stepped forward at the critical moment and not only saved everyone, he also turned the tide. He single-handedly flattened the Northern Plains branch and killed all the enemies. This was too dramatic. The psychological impact it brought to the fourth elder and his disciples was unforgettable. Everyone was excited for a long time, unable to calm down. In the end, Ji Tianxing raised his hand and everyone quieted down. Everyone be quiet. This place is not far from Northern Plains City. I'm afraid the city has already sensed the battle just now. Clean up the battlefield as soon as possible, quickly evacuate this place and report back to Bloodblade sect. All the disciples nodded in unison and acknowledged the order. Now, everyone was in awe of him and obeyed his orders without hesitation. The fourth elder asked with concern, "Young Master Tianxing, where are you going? Are you not going to evacuate with us?" Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, "My whereabouts have nothing to do with you." The fourth elder quickly apologized and said with an embarrassed smile, "I was rude, please forgive me." Ji Tianxing did not say anything else. He turned and flew into the night sky, disappearing into the southern horizon. The fourth elder and the others watched him leave. After that, everyone began to clean up the battlefield, searching for treasures and resources in the ruins. Unfortunately, many of the treasures were hidden deep in the mountain. After Green Summit Mountain was destroyed, those treasures were also destroyed. Large amounts of resources and treasures were buried deep in the ground and would be difficult to clean up in a short period of time. Helpless, the fourth elder and the disciples of Bloodblade sect could only scrounge up a portion of the treasures. When they sensed that a large number of guards had been dispatched from Northern Plains City, they quickly retreated. Not long after, the guard commander of Northern Plains City led a large number of guards to Green Summit Mountain. Everyone only saw that the originally bustling Qingfeng Mountain had already turned into a scene of desolation and devastation. They searched the surroundings but did not see a single living person. Naturally, they did not know who destroyed Green Summit Mountain. The matter of Bloodblade sect declaring war on Bloodsword sect was a tacit understanding among the upper echelons of Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. However, the two great sects were very tactful, and would not make a big fuss about it. They also could not let the garrisons and guards of the various counties catch them in the act. In the territory of Bloodflame Divine Kingdom, they had to take care of the face of the country's ruler and settle any grudges in secret. Otherwise, once the news spread, it would cause chaos among the people. Wouldn't that be slapping the ruler's face and challenging the laws of Divine Kingdom? After leaving Green Summit Mountain, the fourth elder and the elite disciples rode the black mist and quickly retreated. On the way, they were unable to suppress the excitement in their hearts and whispered to each other. "When I heard that young Master Tianxing defeated Left Emissary Jin in one move, I scoffed. Now, it seems that it must be true. That's right. Young Master Tianxing is so strong that he even killed God Monarch Black Flame. It's normal for him to defeat Left Emissary Jin. Tonight, Bloodsword sect set up an ambush and tricked us. If not for young Master Tianxing, we would have been buried in Green Summit Mountain. So, it's all thanks to young Master Tianxing that we were able to leave alive and make such great contributions. Young Master Tianxing is my idol. If anyone dares to criticize him in the future, I won't let them off. When we return to the branch and report what happened tonight to the sect, the elders and envoys will definitely be shocked, right?" Chapter 2970. Seeing the disciples chatting excitedly, the fourth elder couldn't help but worry. "Everyone, while you're happy, don't let your guard down. We still haven't returned to the branch. As long as they were traveling, they were still in danger. Anything could happen. Only when they returned to the branch could they settle down, rest, and celebrate." The Bloodblade sect also had a branch in Northern Plains County, in a city several million li away. They had to retreat to that branch to report the results of the battle and treat their injuries. After a few days of rest, if the sect didn't issue any new orders, they would use the teleportation array to leave Northern Plains County and return to the sect. In truth, Ji Tianxing had wrongly accused the Bloodblade sect. The Bloodsword sect would set up teleportation arrays in Green Peak Mountain to make it easier for the sect's experts to travel. The Bloodblade sect would naturally do the same. Within the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom, the 9 important branches all had teleportation arrays. In the event of an emergency, they could provide reinforcements or retreat as quickly as possible. It wasn't just the large sects that would do this. Even the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom would follow suit. The county lord estates of the various counties were all connected by teleportation arrays that led to the vicinity of the royal capital. In this way, the king's decrees and orders could be spread to the various counties as quickly as possible. However, only high god lords could set up teleportation arrays that could cross tens of millions of li, and they were also extremely expensive. Each activation would consume nearly 1 billion god stones. Thus, unless absolutely necessary, no one would rashly activate a teleportation array. This thing was truly too extravagant. Under the pitch-black curtain of night, the black dragon carried Ji Tianxing and sped through the sky, heading straight for the south. Ji Tianxing sat on the dragon's back with his eyes closed, silently pondering God Lord Blackflame's words. Not long ago, he had killed 2 elders of the Bloodsword sect and the left protector, Lord Kenshin. Tonight, he had killed God Lord Blackflame. The left and right protectors of the Bloodsword sect had all died, leaving only the 3 elders and the sect master and vice-sect master. It was truly a case of withering experts and greatly weakening the sect. To Ji Tianxing, the Bloodsword sect was no longer a concern. The 3 elders were all middle god lords and could be easily killed. The sect master and vice-sect master were both high-level Sir Gods and their abilities were slightly stronger than Sir God Blackflame. With Ji Tianxing's strength and methods, he could kill them one by one. It was just a little troublesome. Of course, his strength had improved again in the past month. Presently, he already reached late-stage 2nd-level Divine Lord and was not far from 3rd-level Divine Lord realm. Once he broke through to the 3rd level of the Divine Lord realm, he would have a much easier time dealing with the 2 sect masters of the Bloodsword sect. The Bloodsword sect was nothing to fear. Ji Tianxing's target was the number 1 sect, Hetian sect. He had previously investigated the information of the 6 major sects. The Hetian sect was indeed the strongest among the 6 great sects in terms of power and number of experts. Moreover, this sect was also the most secretive and low-key. He didn't rely on any of the princes of the Bloodflame Divine Country, so he had a high status and didn't get involved. Ji Tianxing had once thought that since the Hetian sect was so powerful, could it be related to the monarch? This idea was immediately rejected by him. The monarch controlled the entire divine country, so why would he need to raise a sect? However, God Lord Blackflame swore that the Hetian sect's strength was only the tip of the iceberg. Their true strength and foundation were far beyond anyone's imagination. It was very terrifying. This was very thought-provoking. Since it has nothing to do with the monarch and is the number 1 sect in the divine country, they can still maintain an uninvolved attitude. Combined with God Lord Blackflame's reaction, could it be that the Bloodflame Divine Country's Hetian sect is just a branch of the Hetian sect? The Hetian sect has also established branches in the other divine countries? Or even the real headquarters of the Hetian sect is in the Great Yang Empire? Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment before this bold idea appeared in his mind. Although this guess was a little absurd. If he said it out loud, no one would believe him. However, he knew that the more absurd something was, the closer it was to the truth. This is just my guess. It's hard to confirm whether it's true or not. It seems that I have to find a reliable person to inquire about it. If the Hetian sect's foundation is really as I guessed, then I still have to be careful. Although he was very confident and domineering in his actions. However, he would not take risks without preparation. What he needed was to devise strategies and predict the future. Everything was under his control. After thinking for a while, Ji Tianxing took out a communication jade slip and sent a secret letter to left emissary Jin. Not only did he describe the process of what happened tonight in the secret letter, he also inquired about the Hetian sect. Originally, Ji Tianxing and left emissary Jin only had a cooperative relationship. They were not very close and trusted each other. The people he trusted the most were Qi Tianlong and Ning Qinggang. However, He believed that aristocratic families like Qi Tianlong and Ning Qinggang might not know the details of the He Tian sect. Left emissary Jin would know more inside information. After waiting for half an hour, a spiritual light flew from the sky and landed in front of Ji Tianxing. When the spiritual light dissipated, a jade slip appeared. It was from left emissary Jin. Ji Tianxing held the jade slip and read the contents with his divine sense. It was not words, but left emissary Jin's words. Oh my God! I thought that the attack on the Northern Plains branch would be very covert and no one would know. I did not expect the people of the Bloodsword sect to set up an ambush in advance. Fortunately, young Master Tianxing went with us. Otherwise, the fourth elder and those disciples would have been buried in the Green Summit Mountain. Young Master Tianxing's strength and methods are really impressive. You killed God Monarch He Yang. You also got rid of a general of the Bloodsword sect. Our plan will definitely succeed. With such an outstanding contribution, this monarch will definitely report it to the sect master and reward you according to your merit. Left emissary Jin's tone was very excited. It could be heard that he was a little emotional. After all, tonight's matter was full of twists and turns. Even just listening to it was very exciting. After talking about business, left emissary Jin said in a low voice, "Young Master Tianxing, you suspect that the two god monarchs invited by God Monarch He Yang are from the He Tian sect? This should not be. The He Tian sect has always stayed out of things and would not intervene in the disputes of other sects. Young Master Tianxing, do not believe God Monarch He Yang's one-sided story. Perhaps he deliberately made it up to save his life. Although I do not know much about the He Tian sect, I believe that with the He Tian sect's status and strength, it is impossible for them to help the Bloodsword sect." Apart from this, there was nothing else in the jade slip. Left emissary Jin was not clear about the details of the He Tian sect. In fact, he did not know as much as God Monarch He Yang. Ji Tianxing sighed and put away the jade slip. He took out the godhead fragments of God Monarch He Yang, the 3 Bloodsword sect deacons, and the 2 mid-level god monarchs. Since I can't get anything out of them, I will extract their divine soul memories to find the answer. Ji Tianxing picked out the godheads of God Monarch He Yang and the 2 mid-level god monarchs and began to refine them, extracting their divine soul memories. Chapter 2971. The first thing Ji Tianxing refined was the godhead fragment of God Monarch Black Flame. During the previous battle, Ji Tianxing had discovered that this person had grasped over 100 kinds of laws. As expected, God Monarch Black Flame's godhead had condensed over 90 kinds of laws. This number was extremely shocking, far surpassing the number of middle god monarchs. One could imagine that God Monarch Black Flame had cultivated for at least 20,000 years to have such a rich foundation. Ji Tianxing first refined the memories of this person's god soul before taking away his divine Tao laws. After 6 hours, he finally absorbed God Monarch Black Flame's memories. Unfortunately, God Monarch Black Flame's godhead had been poisoned and his god soul's memories were damaged and incomplete. Ji Tianxing picked out the important information and memorized it. Through these important memories, he gained a better understanding of the Bloodsword sect. Although he didn't know everything, he knew at least 80% of it, including many secrets. After all, God Monarch Black Flame was one of the 4 elders of the Bloodsword sect. He had witnessed the establishment, rise, and prosperity of the Bloodsword sect. Ji Tianxing now knew that the Bloodsword sect was extremely ambitious and their true strength was far beyond what it appeared to be. Moreover, the 2 god monarchs that had come from the Hylin County were indeed from the whole Heaven sect. Those 2 god monarchs had originally helped the Bloodsword sect defend the Hylin County branch against the attack of the Bloodblade sect. Unfortunately, God Monarch Black Flame didn't know the identity of those 2 god monarchs in the whole Heaven sect. He also didn't know why the whole Heaven sect, which had a transcendent status, would help the Bloodsword sect. He had asked the 2 sect masters about this matter. But the 2 sect masters kept it a secret and didn't answer his questions. They only vaguely reminded him that this matter was decided by important people and that the Bloodsword sect only needed to follow orders. God Monarch Black Flame was also a smart person and guessed the reason, so he didn't ask again. It really is the whole Heaven sect. The prince behind the Blood Sword sect really has some means to be able to ask the whole Heaven sect for help. Even God Monarch Black Flame doesn't know the inside story. It seems this matter is extremely secretive. Why would the whole Heaven sect help that prince? What conditions could that prince offer that would tempt the whole Heaven sect? Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a long time, but he couldn't figure out the answer. Now that things had developed to this point, he had also experienced so many bloody battles. With Ning Qinggang and left emissary Jin's advice, he was very clear about the situation in the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom. Currently, the 3 princes vying for the throne had all roped in the 6 great sects. The 3rd prince had the support of the 4 Symbols sect, and the 2nd prince had subdued the Evil Blood Palace and many other sects, as well as many border officials and nobles. As for the most low-key 5th prince, he was the backer of the Blood Sword sect. At first, Ji Tianqing did not take the 5th prince seriously. This person was the youngest and had the weakest foundation. Even the sect he had roped in was the 5th-ranked Blood Sword sect, which was only slightly stronger than the Bloodblade sect. However, the appearance of Hatian sect changed Ji Tianqing's view. He vaguely felt that the most low-key 5th prince could be the most ambitious and shrewd person. Otherwise, how could he have asked the He Tian sect for help? Ji Tianqing thought hard to no avail, so he put this matter aside and began to refine the divine Tao laws of God Monarch He Yang. This time, the cultivation took even longer. Ji Tianqing had cultivated 90% of the divine Tao laws that God Monarch He Yang had mastered. There were only 12 divine Tao laws that he had not cultivated before. Therefore, he took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and entered the distorted spacetime to cultivate. It took him a total of 20 days to cultivate the 12 divine Tao laws. At this point, the number of divine Tao laws that Ji Tianqing had mastered had increased to 162. He did not leave the distorted spacetime. Instead, he took out the godheads of 2 middle-level divine lords and began to refine them. These 2 middle-level divine lords were both in the 6th heaven realm. The number of divine Tao laws that they had condensed was about 70, which was considered relatively strong. Ji Tianqing first refined the memories of their divine souls and read the important information from them. After a day, he figured out the situation. These 2 middle-level divine lords were indeed from the He Tian sect. However, they were not deacons or elders of the He Tian sect. They were only guests in name and had the same status as elders. Therefore, the 2 guests did not know much about the secrets of the He Tian sect. They only knew that the He Tian sect was near the capital, in the Bloodflame County's 6 Directions mountain range. The He Tian sect had a strong foundation and was very powerful. Its status was very high. Even the members of the royal family had to be courteous to the He Tian sect. As guests of the He Tian sect, they were respected wherever they went and were respected and flattered by others. For so many years, the 2 of them had abused their power and enjoyed themselves to their heart's content, wantonly amassing wealth and seizing treasures, living a very carefree life. They had only done a few things that really required them to put their lives on the line. After all, ordinary forces did not dare to provoke the He Tian sect. What danger could there be? Even this time, when they were ordered to help the Blood Sword sect, the 2 guests regarded it as a good job and gladly accepted it. In their opinion, the Blood Sword sect would definitely be respectful to them and give them gifts to curry favor. The things that really needed to be fought would be left to the Blood Sword sect. The 2 of them were just going through the motions to represent the He Tian sect's attitude, and that was it. However, the 2 guests did not expect that the result would be the opposite. Their fates would be so miserable. They had been enjoying life in Hylin County when they suddenly received a message from God Monarch Black Flame and rushed over to help. As soon as they arrived at Green Summit Mountain, they saw ruins everywhere and that God Monarch Black Flame was also heavily injured. Not long after fighting, the 2 of them were poisoned and lost the ability to fight. Then, the 2 of them were killed by Ji Tianqing. What an unjust death. Ji Tianqing roughly combed through the memories of the 2 guests. He could not help but feel disappointed when he did not find the answer he wanted. It's a pity that the 2 guests' strength and status were not too high. They could not come into contact with the core secrets of the He Tian sect. They did not know how strong the He Tian sect was, Nor did they know if the other divine kingdoms had branches. They did not even know why the He Tian sect interfered in the battle between the two sects and helped the Bloodsword sect. Ji Tianxing could only comfort himself. If he met the elders and protectors of the He Tian sect in the future, he might be able to find out some secrets. Putting this matter aside for the time being, he began to refine the divine Tao laws of the two guests. The two guests had refined more than 70 divine Tao laws, and most of them were duplicates. Ji Tianxing made a selection and only picked out 8 laws to cultivate. Therefore, he devoured their godheads and deprived them of the 8 divine Tao laws. This cultivation lasted for another half a month. When he successfully refined 8 divine Tao laws, the number of divine Tao laws he controlled had reached 170. At this time, he had already cultivated in the distorted spacetime for more than 30 days. With the addition of 20 divine Tao laws and the godheads of the 3 divine monarchs, his strength had greatly increased. He had finally reached the peak of the 2nd stage and was about to break through to the 3rd stage. Therefore, he stayed in the distorted spacetime and continued to cultivate in seclusion. Not only did he refine the godheads of the 3 Bloodsword sect deacons, he also consumed a large number of divine stones, divine pills, and divine crystals to rapidly increase his strength. End of chapter. Chapter 2972. This time, Ji Tianxing wanted to break through to the 3rd level of the divine monarch realm. Not only did he swallow the godheads of several divine monarchs, he also used up more than 3 billion worth of cultivation resources. Moreover, he cultivated bitterly for an entire year. He finally broke through to the 3rd level of the divine monarch realm. His divine power and godhead became even stronger, and his combat strength also increased by several times. Although he was still a lower divine monarch. But if he met a 7th stage divine monarch again, he could easily defeat them. Even if he met an 8th stage divine monarch, he had a very high chance of winning. Bloodsword sect's threat to him weakened further. Ji Tianxing adjusted his breathing for a few days, then left the divine pagoda and returned to the Black Dragon's back. He cultivated in the distorted space for more than a year, but only 8 days had passed in the outside world. At this time, the Black Dragon had just left Baiyuan County and flew into Hailin County's territory. Qian Yu had been cultivating in seclusion for too long, so she came out to take a breather. She turned into a 2-foot-long ice fox and lay beside Ji Tianxing. A pair of ice-blue eyes stared at Ji Tianxing for a moment, and immediately revealed a look of surprise. "Old Ji, you broke through another level?" She sensed that Ji Tianxing's aura had become even more unfathomable, so she couldn't help but ask. "En." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and responded. Qian Yu said enviously, "Even if you're the reincarnation of a divine king, you shouldn't be so abnormal. How long have you been in the divine realm?" "In less than a year, you broke through to the 3rd level of the divine monarch realm. Such a terrifying cultivation speed, even you in your previous life couldn't compare." Ji Tianxing said with a calm expression, "If I can't surpass my previous life in this life, what's the point of being reborn? Moreover, Wuhan is still in the dragon realm, his whereabouts unknown. I must recover to the divine king realm as soon as possible and go to the dragon realm to find him." Qian Yu nodded in agreement. She said somewhat ruefully, "We can understand your feelings. But your cultivation speed is so fast that it makes everyone feel extremely pressured. We've been cultivating bitterly day and night, only wanting to use more time and effort to catch up to you as soon as possible. But until now, none of us have broken through to the divine monarch realm. The gap between you and me is getting bigger and bigger. Old Ji, it's been a long time since you've worked with everyone. It's been too long since you've relaxed." Qian Yu said emotionally. Ji Tianxing had only been in the divine realm for a few months, but she, Yu Niao, and the others had been in seclusion in the divine pagoda for decades. Ji Tianxing was poked at the sore spot in his heart. He was also filled with sadness and helplessness. He said faintly, "Yes. Currently, I don't have a fixed residence and I'm drifting all over the place. I just want to raise my strength as soon as possible." It had been a long time since he had reunited with his family and friends. "But I had no choice. My current situation can be described as having enemies on all sides. Only by hiding everyone can we protect you. Moreover, We won't leave any openings for our opponents, and we won't give them any chance to take advantage of us. Qian Yu nodded and sighed. That's right. Currently, everyone only has the strength of a heavenly deity, while your opponents are all divine lords. If you take everyone with you, the enemy will definitely find a flaw and create an opportunity to blackmail you. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, It's good that you understand. Actually, Yarrow, Ku, and Wu Shuang all understand this. They will understand me. They will understand because they don't want to be a burden to me. Qian Yu no longer discussed this topic and turned to admire the scenery. At this time, Black Dragon asked in a dull voice, Old Ji, we've already stepped into Heilin County. Where do we go next? Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and said, all the way south. After crossing Heilin County, we'll reach Shanyang County. After crossing 3 more counties, we'll reach the royal capital. You don't need to stay in Heilin County. Go straight south and head to Shanyang County. Black Dragon was startled and asked in disbelief, Old Ji, you're planning to go straight to the Bloodsword sect's base and head to the Dragon Blood Forbidden area? Ji Tianxing smiled and said, I've already killed nearly half of the Bloodsword sect's divine lords. Only 2 sect masters, 3 elders, and a few consecrators remain. The matter of destroying the Bloodsword sect's branch will be left to the Bloodblade sect. What I want to do is to rendezvous with the Bloodblade sect's experts, charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden area, and kill my way into the Bloodsword sect's base. The sooner we deal with the Bloodsword sect, the better. Qian Yu was rather shocked and asked in disbelief, the Bloodsword sect is one of the 6 great sects. Are you confident in dealing with them quickly? What are your plans after dealing with the Bloodsword sect? Ji Tianxing said without hesitation, if the Bloodsword sect is successfully eradicated, we'll continue south to Bloodflame County and enter the royal capital. Calculating the time, the divine blood ceremony will begin at that time. Qian Yu couldn't help but roll his eyes and say with a strange tone, I remember you saying that the divine blood ceremony is a ceremony for the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom to promote new talents and nurture geniuses. You can already destroy the Bloodsword sect, and your strength is comparable to a peak expert, yet you still want to join in the fun? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by those experts? You want to compete with juniors on the same stage and fight for cultivation resources? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said seriously, what do you know? The Bloodflame sacred tree in the royal family's collection is a rare treasure that only appears once in 10,000 years. Halfway through his words, he realized that he had said too much and hurriedly stopped. Black Dragon's body shook, revealing a shocked expression. Qian Yu was also rather surprised. He looked at him with a smile and said meaningfully, Old Ji, you really are lawless and do as you please. TSK. You really don't have good intentions by participating in the divine blood ceremony. Others are asking for the sacred tree's blessing, but you want to take away the entire sacred tree? Isn't that too crazy? Think carefully. When the time comes, the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom will definitely be driven mad by you and will spare no expense to kill you. Ji Tianxing pretended to be dignified and said, Don't talk nonsense. How could there be such a thing? Am I that kind of person? Qian Yu and Black Dragon nodded at the same time. Ji Tianxing was speechless. He glared at Qian Yu and said grumpily, Release time is over. You should go back and cultivate. Qian Yu pouted and muttered, Your scheme was exposed and you became angry from embarrassment. You're still so petty. After saying this, she didn't wait for Ji Tianxing to refute and went back into seclusion. Black Dragon didn't say anything else and flew silently. At the same time, Shanyang County, within the Forbidden Dragon Blood Ground. Everything within a radius of 10,000 miles was blood red. The earth and mountains were all dark red in color, which made them look extremely evil. There was no vegetation in this area, but it was filled with a mysterious power. This invisible divine power gave people an extremely oppressive feeling and was filled with killing intent. This was very compatible with the cultivation methods of the Bloodsword sect. The disciples of the Bloodsword sect could cultivate here with twice the result with half the effort. The entire Forbidden Dragon Blood Ground was covered by a dozen or so large arrays, becoming the private territory of the Bloodsword sect. Outsiders couldn't see the situation in the Forbidden Dragon Blood Ground, nor could they take half a step inside. At the center of the forbidden dragon blood ground was a dark red mountain peak that was thousands of meters tall. This mountain peak was almost perfectly straight and looked like it had been carved by a blade or an axe. It was the headquarters of the Bloodsword sect. The disciples of the Bloodsword sect called it the Bloodsword Sacred Ground. Chapter 2973. The core disciples of the Bloodsword sect lived in the Bloodsword Sacred Ground. There were more than 600 disciples, dozens of deacons, and a few elders. They had all cultivated the divine abilities and secret arts of the Bloodsword sect and had received the divine Tao true inheritance. There were also 3,000-odd workers who did not have the right to live on the sacred mountain. In the dark red earth and mountains around the sacred mountain, a large number of buildings had been constructed for the workers to live and work in. It was currently night time. The dragon blood forbidden land was completely silent, and the cold wind howled. At the peak of the sacred mountain, in a certain majestic and domineering palace, there was a spacious and dazzling secret room. A handsome god race member with a head full of white hair and wearing a black robe was sitting cross-legged in a dark red pool of blood. This god race member was handsome and bewitching, and he looked young. His face was white and translucent, and he had a pair of elf-like pointy ears. On his forehead, there was a lifelike mark of a blood sword. A ball of dark red and purple bloodlight enveloped him. It flickered and flickered continuously, emitting a frighteningly powerful aura. His eyes were tightly shut as he sat there quietly, as if he was in a deep sleep. However, the dark red blood in the pool of blood was constantly boiling, increasing his strength. At this moment, a voice sounded from outside the door of the secret room. "Sect Master, there's news from the Northern Plains branch." The person who spoke was a muscular old man with a head full of purple hair. He wore a purple robe and had a dark golden belt around his waist. The old man wore a luxurious golden crown, and his eyes and face were filled with the vicissitudes of life. He gave off a noble and dignified aura. He was a high god lord who had been famous for many years, the vice-sect master of the Bloodsword sect, Yang Hua. Although the white-haired god race member in the secret room looked younger and more handsome. That was because the sect master had cultivated a divine ability and secret art that made him look like that. The sect master's actual age was far greater than Yang Hua's, and his strength was greater as well. After a while, the white-haired sect master of the Bloodsword sect slowly opened his eyes. His purple eyes were emotionless as he asked in a deep voice, "What's the result?" Outside the secret room, Yang Hua bowed slightly and replied, "The Northern Plains branch has been completely destroyed, including the teleportation array. God Lord Black Flame and the disciples guarding the branch have all been killed. The 2 god lords that had rushed over from the Sea Forest Commandery to reinforce them have also been killed." The sect master of the Bloodsword sect's expression finally changed. He frowned and asked in an even deeper tone, "It's impossible for an elder of the Bloodblade sect to do this. Who did it personally?" "Sect master of the Blood Sword. Tianxing." "It's him again." Sect master Bloodsword narrowed his eyes as a cold glint flashed through his eyes. "This kid's strength is actually so strong that even Black Flame is not his match." Yang Hua was silent for a while before he nodded and said, "According to Great Elder's investigation at the scene, Tianxing should also be a Sir God and he is stronger than Sir God Black Flame." The sect master of the Bloodsword sect remained silent, his eyes flashing with a cold light. Yang Hua thought for a moment before continuing, 2 guests of the Heavenly Unity sect have been killed. This subordinate didn't dare to report this to the Heavenly Unity sect in order to avoid conflict. "Sect master, please make the decision." The sect master of the Bloodsword sect said indifferently, "Those 2 guests have been domineering in the Heavenly Unity sect for a long time. They've received a lot of benefits, but they haven't contributed much. Even if they've been killed, the Heavenly Unity sect won't be so angry. Just report it as it is." Yang Hua hurriedly agreed and sneered, "This subordinate will report it as it is. The 2 guests of the Heavenly Unity sect have been killed, and their reputation has been damaged. They definitely won't let Tianxing off. Perhaps the Heavenly Unity sect will kill that brat without us doing anything." The experts of the Bloodsword sect had died one after another, and their strength had been depleted. However, They had to kill Ji Tianxing. Yang Hua didn't want to do it himself, so he wanted to borrow someone else's knife. It would be best if the experts of the Heavenly Unity sect stepped in. Unexpectedly, the sect master of the Blood Sword sect frowned and coldly reprimanded, "Absurd. That brat has a blood feud with our sect, so it should be our sect that kills him. If we have to rely on the Heavenly Unity sect for such a small matter, won't our sect lose all face and be ridiculed for being incompetent? How could an incompetent sect share the Lord's burdens and solve his problems? How can our Lord stand tall and cooperate with the Heavenly Unity sect on equal terms?" Yang Hua's body trembled, and his expression became somewhat unsightly. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Sect Master is right. This subordinate's thinking is too simple." After a pause, he continued, "Since we can't rely on the Heavenly Unity sect for this matter, we can only take revenge ourselves. And the sooner, the better. The longer we delay, the more our sect's prestige will be damaged. How about this? This subordinate will gather 2 elders and 3 reverends to go to Hailin County to kill that brat." Yang Hua volunteered, wanting to kill Ji Tianxing as quickly as possible. However, the forces he could mobilize were the 3 elders and 3 reverends. These were the only 6 mid-level divine lords left in the Bloodsword sect. The Grand Elder had to guard the dragon blood forbidden ground and could not leave. Therefore, the helpers that Yang Hua could bring with him were only 2 elders and 3 consecrators. The Bloodsword sect master coldly rejected, "There's no need to rush. Don't be impatient. Our sect has tried to kill that brat several times, but we've failed time and time again. Every time, we thought we understood him well enough and found out his strength and background. However, when the operation began, we discovered that his strength and methods exceeded our expectations. Even now, we still haven't seen through his background." Yang Hua was shocked and said in disbelief, "Sect Master, you mean, that brat's strength is not only above Divine Lord Black Flame, but even stronger?" The Bloodsword sect master nodded slightly and said solemnly, "Of course. He can kill Black Flame in a short time, kill thousands of people, and flatten the entire Northern Plains branch. From this, it can be seen that his true strength is above yours, and he can even stand shoulder to shoulder with me." Yang Hua's eyes widened in shock. How is this possible? The Bloodsword sect master ignored him and continued, "Most importantly, this brat is extremely scheming and ruthless. He's extremely difficult to deal with. If it were any other divine lord, they would have factions, family, and friends to tie them down. Our sect can use all sorts of schemes and start with the people around him. We can always find his weakness and force him to submit. However, this Tianxing has always been a loner. Even the factions he's come into contact with are only casual acquaintances and don't have deep relationships. This way, we don't even have the conditions to threaten him. That brat has no weakness at all. He's simply invulnerable. The only way to get rid of him was to use all of his strength and crush him to death with an unstoppable force. We can't leave any leeway, or else he might be able to escape death." End of chapter. Chapter 2974. Yang Hua nodded in agreement at Sect Master Bloodsword's words. He thought for a moment and understood what Sect Master Bloodsword meant. Soon after, a look of deep shock appeared on his face as he said in disbelief, "Sect Master, could it be that you want to?" Sect Master Bloodsword nodded and said in a serious tone, "Send people to keep an eye on his whereabouts and mobilize 2 elders, 3 reverends, and a large number of disciples. Use all the forces we can mobilize to set up a trap at the border between Hailin County and Shanyang County. I will come out of seclusion in 5 days and meet up with all of you. We can only succeed in this battle. Failure is not an option." Yang Hua could feel the sect master's determination. His spirits were lifted, and he bowed solemnly. "This subordinate obeys. Don't worry, sect master. This battle concerns the reputation and future of our sect. This subordinate will do his best. If the plan fails, this subordinate is willing to commit suicide." Sect Master Bloodsword said indifferently, "If the plan fails, you will definitely die on the spot. How will you have the chance to commit suicide?" Yang Hua's body stiffened, and he nodded again. "This subordinate understands. This subordinate will go and make the arrangements now." After saying that, Yang Hua turned and left. Within the secret room, Sect Master Bloodsword slowly closed his eyes. The Bloodsword symbol on his forehead flickered with scarlet light and killing intent soared into the sky. The blood sword that has been sealed for 1,000 years is about to come out of its sheath and drink blood. Sect Master Bloodsword muttered to himself in a cold and sinister tone. In the next few days, the atmosphere in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land became extremely tense and solemn. The entire Shanyang County was filled with undercurrents and killing intent. Sect Master Bloodsword was the local tyrant of this county. Everyone, from the county lords to the various factions, obeyed Sect Master Bloodsword's orders. The various factions received Sect Master Bloodsword's orders and sent their elites and experts to the vast mountain range at the border. The vast mountain range was located at the border between Hailin County and Shanyang County. It was a mountain range with a circumference of 1,000,000 miles and was covered in dense forests. The mountains were high and treacherous. The experts of the various factions didn't know the goal of the vast mountain range. They didn't know what mission they were going to carry out or what dangers they would face. However, the various factions guessed that this mission was definitely going to be a big one. The target of the Bloodsword sect was definitely a peak power. Some well-informed forces knew that the Bloodblade sect had been attacking the Bloodsword sect recently. Therefore, everyone thought that the Bloodsword sect's goal was to ambush the Bloodblade sect. A few days later, in the vast mountain range, there were over 4,000 Heaven God experts and over 20 Sir God experts gathered. Most of these experts were from Shanyang County, and some were from Hailin County. Even the second elder, third elder, and 3 reverends of the Bloodsword sect had personally come to the mountain range to instruct the experts to set up traps and formations. For a time, the boundless mountain range was filled with figures and murderous auras. Even the demonic beasts and divine beasts living in the mountain range felt a strong sense of danger and migrated and fled. On this day, Ji Tianxing was riding on the Black Dragon, flying near the Hailin prefectural city. In the evening, a spiritual light suddenly flew from the horizon and landed in front of him. The spiritual light dissipated, revealing a communication jade slip. Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. He picked up the communication jade slip and frowned as soon as he read it. It was a message from the Bloodblade sect's left emissary Jin. The content was as follows. Young Master Tianxing, a few days ago, you destroyed the Northern Plains branch and killed Sir God Black Flame, dealing a heavy blow to the Bloodsword sect. This matter dealt a great blow to the Bloodsword sect's power and reputation, which made us excited. However, in the past few days, our sect spies have discovered that there are undercurrents in the Hailin and Shanyang counties. The Bloodsword sect has issued a secret order to gather a large number of experts in the mountain range. Even the 2 elders and 3 reverends of the Bloodsword sect have come out in full force to personally oversee the situation in the mountain range. Although our sect spies haven't found out the exact plan of the Bloodsword sect, there are rumors in the pugilistic world that the Bloodsword sect is doing this to ambush us. However, our sect's most recent target is the Bloodsword sect's branch in the other 2 counties. Therefore, I suspect that the Bloodsword sect's target is you. However, I find it hard to believe that the Bloodsword sect would actually go all out in full force to deal with you. I hereby send you a message to remind you to take a detour and avoid entering the vast mountain range. After reading the message, Ji Tianxing put away the jade slip and a cold smile appeared on his face. As I expected, the Bloodsword sect can't sit still anymore. Ji Tianxing had long expected that the Bloodsword sect would have such a reaction. This also proved that the Bloodsword sect's experts had withered and their strength was empty. They were already at the end of their rope. I just broke through to the 3rd layer a few days ago. It's a good opportunity to practice on the Bloodsword sect. Ji Tianxing sneered and began to reply to left emissary Jin. I had long expected that the Bloodsword sect's strength would be empty. They would definitely gather all their strength and release their strongest attack to deal with me. For this monarch, this is undoubtedly a great danger, but it is also an excellent opportunity. Knowing that there are tigers on the mountain, I still want to go there. I will pass through the mountain range as usual and have a decisive battle with the Bloodsword sect. If I can finish this battle in one go, it would be for the best. Even if I can't obtain a complete victory, I can still heavily injure the Bloodsword sect. After that, the Bloodblade sect will do their best to follow me into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and complete the mission. Ji Tianxing wrote these words on the jade slip and sent it out. After an hour, Left Emissary Jin did not reply. Ji Tianxing guessed that this matter was too serious for Left Emissary Jin to make a decision. After another 15 minutes, Left Emissary Jin finally replied. His tone was very solemn and filled with deep anxiety. Young Master Tianxing, the Bloodsword sect has already set up an inescapable net in the vast mountain range. You must not go there. Moreover, our sect has just received a piece of news. The Bloodsword sect's master has said that he will leave seclusion and head to the vast mountain range to invite you to meet him there. When the time comes, he will have a public duel with you to determine victory and defeat. If you lose to him, you can either commit suicide or submit to the Bloodsword sect. If he loses to you, the Bloodsword sect will disband and no longer be your enemy. This is clearly a provocation. The Bloodsword sect's master wants to trick you into going to the vast mountain range and then gather all his forces to attack you. According to our sect's understanding of the Bloodsword sect's master, this person is sinister and ruthless. He will stop at nothing and is definitely not a straightforward and upright person. You must not be fooled and must not believe his word. As a precaution, young Master Tianxing, please hurry to Heilin City as soon as possible. I, the right emissary, and the vice sect master will meet up with you as soon as possible. Evidently, Left Emissary Jin was worried that Ji Tianxing would be too conceited and really head to the vast mountain range to fight the Bloodsword sect's master. In order to prevent this from happening, he did not hesitate to drag the right emissary and the vice sect master to personally protect and persuade Ji Tianxing. Chapter 2975. Ji Tianxing could empathize with Left Emissary Jin's anxiety and worry. After all, he had already killed several experts of the Bloodsword sect. Even Sir God Black Flame, an upper-level Sir God, was killed by him. In the eyes of the Bloodsword sect and the Bloodblade sect, he was a genuine upper-level Sir God. The Bloodblade sect valued him more and more and treated him as their strongest ally. How could they let anything happen to him? Ji Tianxing held the jade slip and thought for a moment before replying to Left Emissary Jin. I've arrived at Heilin County City. I'll be waiting for you at the unnamed villa in the southern suburbs. After sending the message, he let the Black Dragon turn around and fly to Heilin County City. An hour later, the Black Dragon arrived at the southern suburbs of the county city and landed on the top of a mountain. On the lush green mountain, there was an old and dilapidated villa called the Unnamed Villa. A few hundred years ago, this place was once prosperous and bustling with activity. But now, the villa was dilapidated and covered with moss and vines. Many of the houses and palaces had collapsed. Ji Tianxing put the Black Dragon into the Divine Pagoda and stood alone on a dilapidated palace, quietly watching the sunset. After waiting for about an hour, night fell. A purple light flew from the direction of the county city and arrived at the unnamed villa as fast as lightning. Swoosh! The purple light dissipated and 3 figures appeared. The leader was a burly and dignified golden-robed man. He was Left Emissary Jin. Next to him was a stooped purple-robed elder with a blood dragon walking stick. He was the right emissary of the Bloodblade sect. As for the blurry figure behind them, it was both a man and a divine beast. He was the deputy sect leader. After the two sides met, Left Emissary Jin let out a sigh of relief and saluted first. Greetings, young Master Tianxing. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked, Left Emissary Jin, why don't you introduce these two? Left Emissary Jin pointed to the purple-robed elder beside him and introduced, this is the right emissary of our sect, Blood Dragon Elder. Then, he pointed at the illusory figure behind him and said, this is our sect's vice-sect master, the famous Sir God Blood Illusion. The Blood Dragon Right Ambassador and Sir God Blood Illusion nodded at Ji Tianxing. Although they were seniors who had been famous for many years, they treated Ji Tianxing as equals and did not dare to slight him. After all, in the divine world, strength was the only thing that mattered. After the two sides greeted each other, Left Emissary Jin waved his hand and formed a divine formation that enveloped the entire unnamed villa. As a result, Everything in the villa was isolated. The meeting and secret conversation between the three of them would not be discovered by the outside world. Left Envoy Jin said with a complicated expression, "Young Master Tianxing, the Bloodsword sect seems to have been forced into a corner. That's why they're so impatient, wanting to get rid of you as soon as possible. I'm extremely worried that you've fallen for the Bloodsword sect's sect master's trap and really gone to the Boundless Mountain Range to fight him. That guy wasn't some famous senior. He never kept his word and didn't care about his reputation. Therefore, we hurriedly rushed over from the headquarters to discuss countermeasures with you face to face." Ji Tianxing knew that the headquarters of the Bloodsword sect was in a certain county in the south, tens of millions of li away from here. To rush over from the headquarters of the Bloodsword sect, they must have used a teleportation formation and passed through several counties. Therefore, he said with a smile, "You must have paid a price of several billion divine stones to rush over this time, right?" Left Envoy Jin smiled embarrassedly and said somewhat awkwardly, "We've made a fool of ourselves in front of you, young Master Tianxing. We were also worried about your safety." The Blood Dragon Right Ambassador hurriedly explained, "Young Master Tianxing, our sect treats you as our most reliable ally. We have great trust and regard you highly. As long as we can ensure your safety, spending several billion divine stones is nothing. After all, the value of an ally like you is immeasurable." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "All right, let's not talk about these pleasantries. Tell me about your plan." This time, Left Envoy Jin and Blood Dragon Right Ambassador remained silent. The blurry Sir God Blood Illusion opened his mouth and said, "Young Master Tianxing, our plan has progressed to this point and victory is already in our grasp. We've already uprooted 10 of the Bloodsword sect's branches. Nearly half of the Bloodsword sect's Sir God experts have also been killed by you. We only need to carry out the plan step by step and don't need to fight the Bloodsword sect head-on. Therefore, we would like to invite you to our sect's headquarters and stay there for a while. On the day of the final battle, we'll charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land together and destroy the Bloodsword sect in one fell swoop." Ji Tianxing knew that the Bloodsword sect was ranked last among the 6 great sects and had the shallowest foundation. Moreover, the other sects had been roped in by the royal family. Only the Bloodsword sect had no one to rely on. Therefore, the Bloodsword sect was anxious to gain a foothold and expand their influence. Only by seizing the opportunity to destroy the Bloodsword sect and replace it could they quickly strengthen the Bloodsword sect. However, the Bloodsword sect's foundation was weak and they could not advance with their movement techniques. They could only fight steadily and surely. This was why they valued him so much and were unwilling to take risks. However, the Bloodsword sect's plan did not match Ji Tianxing's thoughts. He shook his head and said, "I can understand your sect's stability. However, this is too much of a waste of time. I'm not willing to wait that long." Left Emissary Jin immediately became anxious and asked worriedly, "Young Master Tianxing, you're not thinking of going to the Misty Mountain Range to fight the sect master of the Bloodsword sect to the death, right?" Ji Tianxing shook his head again and sneered, "Haha. If the sect master of the Bloodsword sect does not say so, I'm prepared to go to the Misty Mountain Range. Since he has already done so, wouldn't it be foolish for me to go to the Misty Mountain Range?" Left Emissary Jin furrowed his brows in doubt. "Then you mean," Ji Tianxing pointed to the south and said with a smile, "the Bloodsword sect's forces are all concentrated in the Misty Mountain Range. Isn't this the best opportunity for us to attack the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land?" Left Emissary Jin, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, and God Monarch Blood Illusion were all stunned and revealed deep shock. "What? So fast? Young Master Tianxing, please reconsider." "Young Master Tianxing, the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land is the headquarters of the Bloodsword sect after all, and its defenses are extremely powerful. Furthermore, I'm certain that the sect master of the Bloodsword sect is definitely in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. When you enter the Misty Mountain Range, he will leave the headquarters and fight with you." The 3 god monarchs all felt that Ji Tianxing's decision was too reckless and risky. However, Ji Tianxing was stubborn and said with a calm expression, "According to your plan, it will take at least 3 to 5 months to destroy the Bloodsword sect. That's too slow. I can't wait that long. I'll deal with the Bloodsword sect in half a month. Tonight, We'll head to Shanyang County and attack the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. My target is the sect master of the Bloodsword sect. I'll leave the rest of the small fries to you. God Monarch Blood Illusion and left emissary Jin were hesitant and wanted to dissuade him. Ji Tianxing said with a solemn tone, I've already made up my mind. You don't need to say any more. If you can't make up your mind, ask the sect master now. If the Bloodblade sect is not willing to cooperate, then our cooperation will end here and I'll go alone. Chapter 2976. Since Ji Tianxing had already said so much, Yi Zichen didn't hesitate. The Blood Illusion God Monarch, Gold Left Emissary, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary all remained silent, not knowing what to say. The three divine monarchs looked at each other and secretly communicated with each other. Isn't this brat too domineering and overbearing? The Blood Illusion God Monarch was somewhat dissatisfied. Gold Left Emissary said with a bitter smile, it's natural for a monstrous genius like him to be arrogant and conceited. After all, he hasn't tasted defeat since he appeared in front of our sect. The Blood Dragon Right Emissary said with a bitter tone, but we all know that those old foxes of the Bloodsword sect aren't so easy to deal with. We've fought with the Bloodsword sect for 1,000 years and haven't gained much of an advantage. If young Master Tianxing rushes into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground so recklessly, I'm afraid we'll suffer a great loss. Gold Left Emissary hesitated for a moment and said, but young Master Tianxing's attitude is firm. We can't go against it, or we'll lose this ally. Apart from him, we haven't met such a powerful ally for several hundred years. Don't worry, I'll communicate with him again. If it really doesn't work, I'll ask the sect master to make a decision. The Blood Illusion God Monarch and Blood Dragon Right Emissary both expressed their agreement. Gold Left Emissary bowed to Ji Tianxing and said in a serious tone, young Master Tianxing, we've known each other for so long and I have some understanding of your nature. Although I don't know why you're not willing to wait and are in such a hurry to destroy the Bloodsword sect. But I believe that since you've made this decision, you have the corresponding confidence and assurance, right? Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said in an indifferent tone, get to the point. Gold Left Emissary nodded and said in a serious tone, since that's the case, I'll be blunt. I believe that you have enough confidence and assurance, but our sect has fought with the Bloodsword sect for nearly 1,000 years and has never been able to gain the upper hand. The schemes of the Bloodsword sect's sect master and vice sect master Yang Hua are not as simple as you and I see. We hope to fight steadily and steadily, gradually weakening the Bloodsword sect's strength, and finally kill our way into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and completely destroy the Bloodsword sect. If you directly charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, you'll probably be ambushed by the Bloodsword sect. The sect master's strength was unfathomable. In particular, his sect guardian treasure, the Dark Death Bloodsword that originated from the ancient times, was even more powerful. That bloodsword hasn't appeared in the world for 1,000 years. We don't even know to what extent it's been nurtured. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly, and said in the same solemn tone, what you said, this monarch has considered. In fact, this monarch thinks further than you, and considers more factors. However, I've decided to take advantage of this opportunity to charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and eradicate the Bloodsword sect. So what if there was an ambush in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land? Even if this was a trap, those experts in the vast mountain range had built a teleportation formation to connect to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. When we killed our way into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, they all rushed back to support us, causing us to be surrounded. Even if the situation is so bad, this monarch is still confident. Leave the Bloodsword sect's sect master and vice sect master Yang Hua to me. The three elders and guardians, as well as the experts invited by the Bloodsword sect, will all be dealt with by the Bloodblade sect. Is there a problem? This left emissary Jin immediately fell silent, not daring to reply. The shock in his heart set off perilous waves. Yes, Ji Tianxing had thought further and more thoroughly than he had. Before thinking about victory, he had already considered defeat. He had thought of the worst outcome in advance. However, in this situation, Ji Tianxing was still confident that he could kill the two strongest experts of the Bloodsword sect. Did the Bloodblade sect have any reason to refuse? After a long while, left emissary Jin nodded slightly, If you can kill the Bloodsword sect master and Yang Hua, then there's naturally no problem. The sect master will personally take action, along with God Monarch Blood Illusion, the Blood Dragon Right Emissary, and myself, as well as 5 elders and 2 guardians. In addition, our sect can also invite 10 God Monarchs to help. With all the strength of our sect, we can naturally kill the experts of the Bloodsword sect. Ji Tianqing nodded. Since that's the case, what are you hesitating for? Send a message to the sect master now and ask him to make a decision. Left Emissary Jin hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath and nodding. Okay, please wait a moment, young Master Tianqing. After saying that, he took out a special purple jade slip and sent a message. When the message flew into the night sky and disappeared, he frowned and waited for a reply. God Monarch Blood Illusion and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary were also nervous and apprehensive. Left Emissary Jin had reported Ji Tianqing's decision and the pros and cons of the matter to the sect master in detail. However, the 3 of them were still worried that the sect master might reject this request and reject Ji Tianqing's suggestion. If that happened, the cooperation between the 2 sides would break down and they would have to part ways. Even if the Bloodblade sect had already obtained victory and weakened the strength of the Bloodsword sect. However, without Ji Tianqing's help, the Bloodblade sect still did not have much confidence. It had only been an hour. However, for Left Emissary Jin and the others, it seemed extremely long and torturous. Finally, the Bloodblade sect's sect master replied. A spiritual light flew over from the horizon and landed in Left Emissary Jin's hand. God Monarch Blood Illusion and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary's gazes immediately gathered on his hand. Left Emissary Jin took a deep breath and held the purple jade slip with both hands to read its contents. The Bloodblade sect's sect master's voice immediately sounded in his mind. It was crisp, decisive and dignified. I am already aware of young Master Tianqing's decision. After careful consideration, I have finally made up my mind to grasp this opportunity and gamble with him. I have fought with the Bloodsword sect for 1,000 years without any results. My accumulated anger cannot be dispelled. If this operation succeeds, please tell young Master Tianqing to let me deal with the Bloodsword sect's sect master. Even if I have to whip his corpse, I will take revenge for that sword strike. The tone of the last sentence was cold and murderous. Obviously, the Bloodblade sect and the Bloodsword sect had a blood feud. There was also a great personal grudge between the Bloodblade sect and the Bloodsword sect's sect master. After Left Emissary Jin finished reading the contents of the jade slip, he did not immediately tell Ji Tianqing. Instead, he passed the jade slip to God Monarch Blood Illusion and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary for them to read. After the 2 of them finished reading the jade slip, the 3 of them looked at each other in disbelief. The sect master actually agreed. Perhaps the sect master is wise and knows the pros and cons of this, so he decided to gamble with young Master Tianqing. Moreover, the grudge between the sect master and the Bloodsword sect master has been accumulating for 1,000 years. The sect master's hatred for the Bloodsword sect's sect master is deeply rooted in his bones. As long as he can take revenge, he has to try even if he has to take the risk. Left Emissary Jin and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary were even more convinced by God Monarch Blood Illusion's words. They both nodded in agreement. Afterwards, Left Emissary Jin bowed to Ji Tianqing and said, "Young Master Tianqing, after careful consideration, the sect master has agreed to your proposal and is willing to cooperate with you. From the beginning to the end, we have been the staunchest of allies. We are bound together for good or ill. I hope that this risky operation will be successful." End of chapter. Chapter 2977. The master of the Bloodblade sect agreed to Ji Tianqing's plan. Ji Tianqing naturally did not reject her request. After killing his way into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, it would be best if he could capture the master of the Bloodblade sect alive and hand her over to be dealt with. Even if he could not do it, he could at least let the master of the Bloodblade sect whip his corpse to vent the hatred that had accumulated for thousands of years. The matter was thus settled. Ji Tianqing followed Left Emissary Jin and the other 2 and quietly left the unnamed villa. Under the cover of the night, the 4 entered Hailin County City and arrived at a certain villa in the west of the city. On the surface, this villa looked like the residence of a wealthy merchant. There were a lot of people in the mansion, and they were rich and overbearing. Everywhere was built in a grand and magnificent manner. Usually, many merchants and caravans would enter and leave this villa. Even at night, there would be an endless stream of visitors. But in reality, this villa was the secret base of the Bloodblade sect and also the branch of the Heilin County. Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin and the other two quietly entered the underground passage under the lead of the guard commander. Then, they stepped into an underground hall. The hall was heavily guarded and protected by a powerful array to prevent outsiders from spying on them. In the center of the hall was a high platform with a radius of 300 meters. It was made of dozens of precious gems and special spatial god stones. Densely packed array patterns were carved on it. Without a doubt, this was a teleportation array. The guard commander and the deacon of the branch were busy adding spatial god stones to activate the teleportation array. Ji Tianxing and the other three stood in the hall and waited. Taking advantage of this opportunity, left emissary Jin introduced to Ji Tianxing, "This teleportation array is very expensive to build. The cost of maintenance and use is also very high. Although our sect has branches in 18 counties, only 9 of them are equipped with teleportation arrays. The one in Heilin County is the northernmost one. In a while, we will use this teleportation array to enter Shanyang County in the south. It will save us at least 8 days. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "The reason why teleportation arrays are so expensive is because spatial godstones are very rare. In fact, experts who had reached the Divine King realm did not even need a teleportation array to travel. This is because Divine King experts' divine power is strong enough to make use of spatial laws to teleport. Even a first-degree Divine King can teleport up to 100 million miles in one go. Actually, this was only for ordinary Divine Kings. He had already mastered spatial laws and could teleport up to 200,000 miles in one go. When he reached the 9th level Divine Lord realm, he could teleport up to 1,000,000 miles. If he reached the Divine King realm, he would be able to teleport up to 100 million miles in." After hearing what he said, left emissary Jin, Blood Dragon Right Emissary and Sir God Blood Illusion smiled bitterly. Left emissary Jin shook his head. Divine King said Divine King to teleport. But Divine King experts. Not to mention the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, even in the entire Great Yang Empire, there hadn't been a God King expert for close to 1,000 years. I estimate that only the entire Northern Heaven region will give birth to 2 or 3 Divine Kings. Ji Tianxing listened with a calm expression and didn't say anything. According to the situation 1,000 years ago, this was indeed the case. A region only had 2 or 3 Divine Kings. He didn't know what boundless Heaven mainland looked like now. Very soon, an hour passed. The teleportation array was fully activated. The high platform lit up with rainbow divine light and gave out a strong fluctuation of divine power. In the middle of the high platform, there was a 30 feet tall door of blazing white light. It was dark inside the door. "Let's go." Divine King of the Divine King Blood Illusion led the way to the door of light. Left emissary Jin, Divine King of the Divine King and Ji Tianxing followed closely behind. Swoosh. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The 4 of them stepped into the door of light one after another and were swallowed by the darkness. After a while, the teleportation door of light dissipated slowly. The divine light on the high platform also disappeared gradually. Ji Tianxing only felt darkness in front of his eyes and then it became bright. When he opened his eyes and could see his surroundings clearly, he was already at another location. Swoosh. Swoosh. He looked around and realized he was standing on a stone platform that was 100 feet tall. Divine King of the Divine King Blood Illusion, Divine King of the Divine King Blood Illusion and left emissary Jin were beside him. The high platform with a radius of 100 feet was lit up with divine light. There were dozens of guards around it. At first glance, it was no different from the Heilin County branch. The teleportation array and the guards' attire were all the same. But in fact, this was the Shanyang County branch. A guard commander came forward and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Deputy Sect Leader, Left Emissary Jin, and Divine King of the Divine King." Left emissary Jin pointed at Ji Tianxing and said, "This is young Master Tianxing." The guard commander was stunned. He quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, young Master Tianxing." Ji Tianxing didn't mind. He waved his hand and asked him to leave. Then, the four of them walked out of the underground hall and returned to the manor above ground. The Shanyang County branch was also a manor. But it wasn't in Shanyang County. It was at the peak of a towering mountain tens of thousands of miles away from the city. Half of the mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist. The manor seemed to be in a sea of clouds, and the environment was quiet and elegant. Left Emissary Jin and the others were very familiar with this. After settling Ji Tianxing in a courtyard, they went to carry out their mission. Although Ji Tianxing wanted to launch a surprise attack on the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds and end the battle at lightning speed. However, they couldn't be reckless. Left Emissary Jin and the other two still needed to make some preparations. At the very least, he had to gather a large number of elite experts in advance. The Left Emissary Jin and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary were the best at mobilizing people, so it was fine to leave it to them. Ji Tianxing didn't need to care about anything. He only needed to meditate in the courtyard. 2 whole days passed. Inside the Shanyang County branch, the atmosphere was heavy and solemn. Every once in a while, a group of elite experts would arrive at the branch through the teleportation array. These elite experts were the backbone of the Bloodblade sect. There were elite disciples of the Bloodblade sect as well as experts from their vassal forces. In these 2 days, more than 30 groups of experts had gathered at the Shanyang County branch through the teleportation array. According to Left Emissary Jin's calculations, more than 800 elite experts and 18 god lords had been gathered in the past 2 days. Of course, the elders and guardians of the Bloodblade sect, as well as the 200 or so disciples, did not come. They would follow the sect master of the Bloodblade sect and head to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds. Everyone would only gather when the final battle began. At dawn on the 3rd day, the people of the Bloodblade sect started to gather. More than 800 people lined up neatly on the square in the middle of the manor. These 800 experts were all wearing standard black armor with the symbol of the Bloodblade embroidered on their chests. They were divided into 18 teams led by 18 god lords. They drove the divine ships toward the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds. Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, Left Emissary Jin and Ji Tianxing moved together. They also took a Monarch-grade divine ship and left the Shanyang County branch. When the sky just brightened, 19 divine warships of various shapes and sizes flew into the sky one after another, heading toward the southeast. Today was the day to enter the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds and fight to the death. P.S. Readers, I'm He Woohan. I recommend a free app that supports downloading, listening to books, no ads, and many reading modes. Please follow, book friends, quickly follow. Chapter 2978. The Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground was 800,000 miles away from the Shanyang County branch. With the speed of 19 divine ships, they could arrive in 4 hours. This distance was relatively close. Ji Tianxing could not help but wonder if the Bloodblade sect master had set up the Shanyang County branch nearby because he wanted to reach the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground as quickly as possible. On the way to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, within the dark red divine ship, Ji Tianxing, Left Emissary Jin, and Blood Illusion God Lord sat in a secret room, meditating. Blood Dragon Right Emissary was focused on steering the divine ship while checking the surroundings. With nothing to do, Ji Tianxing asked Left Emissary Jin, "What is the enmity between your sect master and the Bloodsword sect master? Why does the Bloodblade sect master hate the Bloodsword sect master so much that he wants to vent his anger by whipping his corpse?" Left Emissary Jin had a difficult expression as he stammered, "Young Master Tianxing, I'm not too sure." It was not that he did not know, but that he did not dare to speak casually. Blood Illusion God Lord said calmly, "Now that things have come to this, the final battle is about to be decided. Young Master Tianxing is with us, so what else can't you say?" Left Emissary Jin only spoke after getting the Vice Sect Master's approval. Young Master Tianxing, the Sect Master and the Bloodsword Sect Master were actually brother and sister 2,000 years ago. Senior brother and junior sister? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and was immediately interested. He asked, "What's going on? Tell me about it." Left Emissary Jin said calmly, 2,000 years ago, in the southern celestial beast empire, there was a hermit called Lin Wufar, known as Divine Lord Wufar. His life was legendary. He had a like-minded partner and they traveled the world hand in hand, exploring various forbidden grounds and ruins. The couple did not like power, but they were obsessed with studying ancient divine Tao techniques and were determined to travel the entire continent. They were in love for many years, but they did not have a child, so they adopted a celestial beast boy and named him Lin Shan. Lin Shan was extremely talented and had high comprehension, so he learned the true teachings of Divine Lord Wufar. Decades later, his wife gave birth to a girl named Lin Shui. Shui Lin has inherited the wisdom and beauty of the immortal couple. She is naturally lively, kind, enthusiastic and cheerful. Her cultivation aptitude and talent are even more monstrous than Lin Shan's. At this point, Ji Tianxing vaguely guessed the answer. He nodded and said, "In that case, your sect master is Lin Shui, and Lin Shan is the master of the Bloodsword sect?" Left emissary Jin nodded and continued, "Originally, the Divine Emperor and his wife loved each other very much. Their disciple and daughter were both very intelligent and talented. Their family of 4 traveled the world, and it could be said that their happiness was complete. However, during one of their adventures, they fell into a desperate situation, and there was no chance of survival. In order to save Lin Shan and Lin Shui, the wife of the immortal monarch sacrificed herself and finally died. Since then, the powerless divine monarch had suffered a heavy blow and was disheartened. Therefore, he ended his adventuring career and brought Lin Shan and Lin Shui to live in seclusion at the border of the Celestial Beast Empire. During those hundreds of years, the grief of not being able to become a divine monarch could not be erased. Thus, he wholeheartedly taught his disciples and daughter. He had a blood sword and the wife of the immortal monarch had a demon knife. They were both top-grade divine weapons passed down from ancient times. The powerless divine monarch gave the blood sword to Lin Shan and imparted him all kinds of secret arts and sword arts. He then passed the demon knife to Lin Shui and taught her all kinds of divine arts. When he heard this, Ji Tianxing tried to ask, "So this is the origin of the Bloodsword sect and the Bloodblade sect. But what happened after that? Was the powerless divine monarch killed?" Left emissary Jin took a deep look at him and nodded solemnly, "That's right. 1,000 years ago, during the War of the Gods, the entire boundless heaven continent fell into chaos. At that time, the powerless divine monarch had already reached the 8th stage realm. Lin Shan had also reached the 7th stage realm, becoming an upper divine monarch. Even the youngest Lin Shui had also reached the 6th stage realm. When the war struck, the Sky Demon Empire was embroiled in endless chaos. The powerless divine monarch was also implicated. He was severely injured and could only escape with Lin Shan and Lin Shui. However, Lin Shan had wild ambitions and secretly colluded with a strong enemy. Not only did he kill the powerless divine monarch and snatch his life's ultimate arts and divine arts, he even pushed the blame onto the strong enemy and pretended to take revenge for his master. He even wanted to marry Lin Shui as his wife, rather than cultivating the dragon sword phoenix blade technique. After all, the powerless divine monarch and his wife both wielded the blood sword and demon knife. The two of them were in perfect harmony and had great chemistry. If the powerless divine monarch's wife did not fall, they would have great hopes of breaking through to the divine king realm. Lin Shan did this because he wanted the demon knife and the dragon sword phoenix blade technique. However, the heavens were clear. Lin Shui was deceived for a while, but she still discovered Lin Shan's evil deeds. The two of them broke off and had a great battle. In that battle, Lin Shui was no match for the bloodsword Lin Shan. Not only was her godhead damaged, her heart was also pierced. Lin Shui used a secret art and after luckily escaping, she concealed her identity for hundreds of years. 100 years later, she finally recovered from her injuries and broke through to the 7th stage realm. When she went to find Lin Shan to take revenge, she discovered that Lin Shan had already left the Sky Demon Empire and disappeared without a trace. After many inquiries and searches, Lin Shui finally found out that Lin Shan had escaped to the Great Yang Empire and established his own sect in the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, establishing the Bloodsword sect. Hence, she chased him to the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom to seek revenge on Lin Shan. But unfortunately, she was alone and weak. She failed several times to assassinate Lin Shan and even fell into a dangerous situation herself. Later on, she made 2 good friends, and under the persuasion of her good friends, she established the Bloodblade sect. Speaking to this point, Left Emissary Jin's tone turned gloomy and was filled with indignation. Ji Tianxing felt the same way as he nodded. That Blood Sword sect's master Lin Shan is indeed sinister and despicable, unscrupulous. No wonder your sect master has such a deep blood feud with him and even whipped his corpse to vent his anger. The enmity of killing one's father is absolutely irreconcilable. That's right, your sect master's 2 best friends should be the both of you, right? Left Emissary Jin nodded and explained, the reason why Xue Huan does not have a physical body and has always appeared as an illusion is not only because his cultivation technique is special. Most importantly, Xue Huan helped the sect master block Lin Shan's blood sword secret technique back then, and his divine body was destroyed by the blood sword. Ji Tianxing finally understood and could not help but feel deep veneration. The friendship between the 3 of you is not easy to come by. Fortunately, the 2 of you helped and supported him. Otherwise, your sect master would not have been able to last until today. Xue Huan said in a gloomy voice, our original intention in establishing the Bloodblade sect was to kill the Bloodsword sect's master and avenge him. As long as we can kill the Bloodsword sect's master Lin Shan, we will not hesitate even if we have to bury the entire Bloodblade sect. However, I have to remind you, young Master Tianxing, that blood sword is a remnant of the old divine lord. It is a supreme divine weapon at the monarch level and has unbelievable effects. After 1,000 years of nurturing, Lin Shan has already raised the power of the blood sword to another level. I reckon that apart from the sect master's demon blade, no other divine weapon can resist it. Young Master Tianxing, you have to be wary of that blood sword. Mobile version update website, M. Chapter 2979. Ji Tianxing finally understood after hearing the story of the Bloodblade sect master and the Bloodsword sect master. It was no wonder that the Bloodblade sect master agreed after careful consideration when his suggestion was so radical. This was because the Bloodblade sect master wanted revenge too much. It was no wonder that the other 5 sects would form cliques and rely on the royal family. Only the Bloodblade sect remained unrecruited, ranking last among the 5. This was because the other sects were ambitious. They wanted to fight for power and status and pass down their legacies. The Bloodblade sect was founded for revenge. Everything made sense now. The Bloodblade sect master is actually a woman, and a woman with a hard life. Ji Tianxing sighed silently. But on second thought, wasn't it because the other sects were ambitious while the Bloodblade sect only wanted revenge? Was that why he had formed an alliance with the Bloodblade sect and became their ally? In that case, it could be said that it was the will of the heavens. His unintentional action had actually helped the Bloodblade sect greatly. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. The 19 divine warships crossed mountains and rivers and were about to reach the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land when they slowed down. Young Master Tianxing, the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land is up ahead. We've arrived, Left Envoy Jin reminded. Ji Tianxing finished his meditation and released his divine sense to explore the outside. He saw a region shrouded in dark red mist in the mountains and rivers 5,000 kilometers away. The surrounding area was filled with green mountains and clear waters. Only the area within a radius of 5,000 kilometers was dyed a dark red color by blood. Ji Tianxing could sense a special aura permeating that region. There was an invisible force field. Left Envoy Jin took the initiative to introduce, the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land originated several thousand years ago. Legend has it that a divine dragon fell here, slain by a god king. After the divine dragon died, its flesh and blood returned to the world, dyeing that region red with blood. After several thousand years, the ground is still dark red and filled with a powerful dragon's aura. This place once attracted countless powerful monsters and divine beasts, who stayed here all year round to absorb the dragon's aura. The Bloodsword sect master chose to establish his sect here because he wanted to absorb the dragon's aura to nurture his bloodsword and increase his strength. Ji Tianxing nodded and asked, "What's the situation in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land now? Do you have a plan of attack?" The Blood Illusion God Monarch took the initiative to answer, Our sect has placed a few spies in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. Not long ago, the spies reported that the defenses in the forbidden area were empty. Most of the elites and main forces of the Bloodsword sect were concentrated in the vast mountain range. Currently, there were only 500 guards, over 3,000 odd-job workers, and over 100 elite disciples in the forbidden area. Other than that, the Bloodsword sect's sect master has been guarding the sacred ground and hasn't shown himself. After introducing the situation of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, he sneered coldly and said, "Young Master Tianqing's prediction is very accurate. The Dragon Blood Forbidden Land is empty of power, and it is the best time for us to take revenge." The sect master, several elders, and consecrators were rushing over with the elite disciples of the sect. Based on their speed, we should be able to meet up in 4 hours at most. The sect master's intention is to wait for our army to gather before we charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land together. They had to flatten the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land with the momentum of a thunderbolt. We must not give the Bloodsword sect a chance to catch their breaths and prevent any unexpected changes from happening. Ji Tianqing thought for a while and shook his head. The sect master's thoughts coincide with mine. But since we have already arrived, it is not good to wait any longer. Otherwise, the Bloodsword sect will quickly notice and defend with all their strength. I have decided to charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land before the Bloodsword sect can react. By the time the sect master arrives, we will have already cut off the wings of the Bloodsword sect and should be attacking the sacred mountain. The blood illusion god monarch hesitated and couldn't make up his mind. Left emissary Jin frowned and thought for a while before saying, "Young Master Tianqing, please be patient. I will first send a message to the sect master to ask for instructions." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. Left emissary Jin hurriedly took out a jade slip to ask for the Bloodblade sect master's opinion. In less than 100 breaths, he received a reply from the Bloodblade sect master. There was only one sentence in the jade slip, but it was extremely heavy. "Before this seat arrives, we will follow young Master Tianqing's orders." Left emissary Jin was rather shocked and handed the jade slip to the blood illusion god monarch and the blood dragon sect master. After reading it, the two of them revealed looks of disbelief. They simply couldn't believe that the sect master had never seen Ji Tianqing before, but trusted him so much. Could it be that the sect master and young Master Tianqing were of the same mind, and their thoughts and personalities were very similar? Left emissary Jin and the other two immediately cupped their hands and bowed to Ji Tianqing, saying, "As per the sect master's orders, before she arrives, we will follow young master's orders." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said in a solemn tone, "Very good. The blood illusion god monarch and the right emissary will follow me into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and try to destroy the defensive formation. Left emissary Jin will stay here and command the 18 divine ships to wait for our signal. After we break through the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land's defenses and send you a signal, we will launch a large-scale attack." Left emissary Jin felt slightly comforted and hurriedly nodded, saying, "As per the young master's orders, this method is more reliable. I was worried that you would lead everyone to attack directly." Ji Tianqing couldn't be bothered with him, but the blood illusion god monarch coughed and reminded him, "Young master's strategy and wisdom are at the same level as the sect master's. It's not something you can understand or guess." Left emissary Jin smiled embarrassedly, saying, "Young master, please don't blame me. Let's not waste time. It's time to move." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and flew out of the divine ship first. The two divine monarchs, Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon, hurriedly followed him out of the divine ship. Ji Tianqing used the armillary heaven secret technique and merged with the world, hiding his tracks and aura. Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon also used their concealment techniques and followed him silently, heading straight for the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. The reason why Ji Tianqing chose them to follow him was because they were better at concealment and wouldn't be discovered by the people of the Bloodsword sect. Soon, the three of them crossed thousands of miles and stepped into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. As soon as they entered the dark red blood ground, an invisible dragon aura force field enveloped the three of them like a formation. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was completely unaffected. Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon's divine power circulation slowed down slightly, and their auras weakened by 30%. This was the suppression of the divine dragon's might, and no one could avoid it. After all, the divine dragon bloodline was naturally noble. Unless one was like Ji Tianxing, who possessed the bloodline of a peak god king, only then would one be able to ignore the might of a divine dragon. After walking 1,000 feet into the forbidden land, Ji Tianxing stopped flying. He used his God's Eye mystic technique and immediately saw that there was an invisible defensive formation in front of him. This was the outermost layer of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds, the first layer of the Great Sect Protection Formation. The dark red light shield with a radius of 10,000 miles was a monarch-grade high-grade divine formation. Its defensive power was extremely strong. Ji Tianxing's eyes turned golden as he stared at the light barrier without blinking. He carefully observed it for a quarter of an hour. Finally, he was able to see through the structure of the formation, as well as the method of setting it up. He also found the point of breaking it. Without any hesitation, he used his divine ability to break the formation. End of chapter. Update soonest. The new 81st Chinese Network, M. Chapter 2980. Ji Tianxing stood invisible in the sky, concentrating on casting a spell to break the formation. Sir God Xuehuan and Sir God Xuelong were guarding him on both sides. Luckily, this was the outermost circle of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and there weren't many patrolling guards. Plus, no one had directly attacked the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground since the Bloodsword sect was founded 1,000 years ago. Those guards were already careless and wouldn't be too vigilant when patrolling. In just an hour, Ji Tianxing had cracked the Grand Protective Formation. Swish! A giant crack appeared on the invisible dark red light shield and quickly spread in all directions. After a while, the crack expanded to 10 miles. Besides, the array also stopped working and wouldn't automatically repair the crack. Ji Tianxing took Xuehuan and Divine Lord Blood Dragon through the crack and continued to fly into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. After flying another 3,000 miles, they were blocked by the second invisible array. This was a rainbow-colored light barrier that blotted out the sky. It maintained an invisible state, and its defensive power was even stronger. Not only was this array strong, but it could also detect divine power waves and attack invaders. Ji Tianxing observed the formation even more cautiously, and only after a full 15 minutes did he begin to crack it. This time, it took more time to break it. It took almost 2 hours. The array stopped working and a giant crack appeared and spread in all directions. It only calmed down after the crack expanded to 20 miles. Ji Tianxing and the other two continued to go deeper. When they arrived at the heart of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds and saw the dark red Lone Peak, they were blocked by the third sect protecting Grand Formation. This great Crimson Blood Formation with a radius of 1,000 miles was the last great protective formation. It wasn't invisible, it had always been there, flashing dark red light and surrounded by red flames. After all, this was the core area of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and most of the guards were gathered here. At least 200 guards in blood-red armor were patrolling the ground and the sky with sabers, swords, and bows in their hands. The atmosphere became very tense. The two divine lords, Xuehuan and Xuelong, were sweating. Ji Tianxing wasn't worried. He said, "What are you worried about?" In any case, it was the last protective formation. As long as it could be broken, it didn't matter even if it was discovered. Once this monarch breaks this formation, send out the signal to attack. Xuehuan and Sir God Blood Dragon were relieved. They replied with a voice transmission. This time, Ji Tianxing was even more careful when cracking the formation. He racked his brains and used his Deity King level experience in array formations. After 3 attempts, he finally succeeded. Even so, he still spent an entire hour. When the formation was broken, the crimson light shield within a radius of 1,000 miles burst into cracking noises and burst into a blood-red light that soared into the sky. Dozens of huge cracks quickly spread across the light barrier. A large cluster of bloody light and flames quickly collapsed and dissipated. Such a huge commotion immediately alerted the surrounding guards. Many of the guards were horrified and sent out alarms, asking for help from the disciples on the holy mountain. More than 100 guards rushed over from all directions to the place where the gap had appeared. This area was where Ji Tianxing and the other two were hiding. Shui Huan and Sir God-Blood Dragon remembered his instructions and sent out the signal to attack without hesitation. Boom! Crack! Two dazzling beams of blood-red light soared into the sky like divine dragons and exploded with a loud bang. At the same time, Ji Tianxing flew out as fast as lightning and pounced on the nearest group of guards. There were a total of 36 crimson armor guards. They all held swords, spears, swords, and halberds. They rushed over with murderous intent and roared. Ji Tianxing raised his right palm expressionlessly and slapped out a mountain-sized golden dragon claw. Boom! The next moment, there was a deafening sound. The 36 crimson armor guards were smashed into pieces by the golden dragon claw. Their flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Instant kill. They were only LV4 or LV5 Heavenly God Realm guards. Even if there were 36 of them, they could only be killed by Ji Tianxing with one slap. Then, Ji Tianxing turned around and flew to the other side. He crossed 100 miles in one step and punched another group of crimson armor guards. Boom! Crack! More than 20 crimson armor guards were smashed into meat paste by the draconic elephant divine fist. Blood splattered everywhere. Sir God-Blood Dragon and Sir God-Blood Huan witnessed this scene with their own eyes. Seeing Ji Tianxing's prowess, the two of them were excited and surprised. Young Master Tianxing is indeed our sect's lucky star. The 3 layers of the sect protection array of the Bloodsword sect are impregnable. No one can break through them. Today, he managed to break through all of them in 4 hours. This is a miracle. His strength is unfathomable. His methods are ruthless and decisive. Even his attainments in the array Dao are so high. Who is young Master Tianxing? While they were shocked, Sir God-Blood Dragon and Sir God-Blood Huan drew their swords and charged at the nearby guards. Kill! Kill all the bastards of the Bloodsword sect! The 2 Sir God-Blood Dragon roared as they used their divine skills and massacred group after group of guards. In a short while, the 200 or so crimson armor guards were slaughtered by the 3 of them. Not a single corpse was left intact. However, there were still more than 100 guards who rushed over fearlessly. They no longer fought individually. Instead, they gathered together and formed the Crimson Sword 8 Gates battle formation. This battle formation contained the true intent of the 8 Gates extreme weapons. It could gather the power of 160 guards and use divine skills that were comparable to a Sir God's. After the battle formation was activated, the 100 or so guards moved in unison. They seemed to have a tacit understanding. Dazzling crimson sword lights that were more than 100 feet long slashed over one after another. Sir God-Blood Dragon and Sir God-Blood Dragon had solemn expressions as they blocked and dealt with the attacks seriously. However, Ji Tianxing turned a blind eye to it. He didn't put this battle formation in his eyes at all. He roared in a domineering manner and charged towards the battle formation with an indomitable will. He clenched his hands in the air and formed 2 golden dragon claws that were as big as mountains. He then smashed down with an unstoppable force. Boom! A loud sound, as if stars had collided, exploded in the sky. The 2 golden dragon claws fell like meteors and hit the battle formation. Immediately, the Crimson Sword 8 Gates battle formation was smashed into pieces. The crimson swords in the sky were smashed into pieces and the 100 or so guards were also smashed into meat paste. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. A 100-mile-deep pit was formed on the ground and spiderweb-like cracks appeared around it. Sir God-Blood Dragon and Sir God-Blood Dragon could also do such a powerful destructive force. However, the 2 of them didn't have Ji Tianxing's ability to see through the flaws of the Crimson Sword 8 Gates battle formation and destroy its vital points in an overbearing manner. To a Sir God, strength and cultivation were important. However, battle experience, insight and knowledge were more important. In the blink of an eye, the 100 or so crimson armor guards were all killed by Ji Tianxing. There were no more obstacles in front of him. Ji Tianxing charged towards the sacred mountain with murderous intent. At the same time, 10,000 miles away, Left Emissary Jin received the signal and led 18 battleships to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. Chapter 2981. The 18 divine ships formed a formation and charged into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. Every divine ship opened their divine cannons, the muzzles glowing with divine light. The moment they discovered the guards and disciples of the Bloodsword sect, the 18 divine ships would unleash a barrage of attacks and wash the land with blood. Under such circumstances, only divine Lord experts would be spared. No matter how many celestial god guards and experts there were, they would all be turned to dust. However, the 18 divine ships did not encounter any resistance from the Bloodsword sect. Everyone could only see the devastated land, which was filled with ravines and cracks. What was even more surprising was that the Bloodsword sect originally had 3 protective arrays. Each one was more sophisticated than the last and had a powerful defense. However, the divine ships did not encounter any resistance as they advanced. The 3 sect protecting great formations were all broken. They all stopped operating, and a huge gap appeared. Left emissary Jin, the 18 divine lords, and the other experts were all shocked. Everyone found it hard to believe that Ji Tianxing had actually broken through 3 sect-protecting grand arrays in a short span of 4 hours. This was an unbelievable miracle. Soon, the 18 divine ships reached the core region of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and arrived near the sacred mountain. The divine ships spread out and stopped in the sky, surrounding the lone sacred mountain. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Left emissary Jin and the 18 divine lords left the divine ships and stood in the sky. They all took out their weapons and glared at the sacred mountain. More than 800 elite experts remained in the divine ships and waited for orders. Everyone saw Ji Tianxing, Xue Huan, and Xue Long looking down at the peak of the sacred mountain with murderous intent. Ji Tianxing stood at the front, closest to the sacred mountain. With a voice as loud as a bell, he shouted, "Lin Shan, come out and die." His thunderous voice reverberated through the sacred mountain, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. On the wide and flat peak of the sacred mountain, there were only 100 guards in blood-red armor gathered in the plaza. They all gripped their weapons and stood in a defensive formation, warily glaring at Ji Tianxing's group. Hearing Ji Tianxing's shouts and provocations, many of the guards showed indignation, but no one dared to come out and fight. Just a moment ago, they had witnessed Ji Tianxing display his invincible might and easily kill over 100 guards. They had all been scared out of their wits and fled back to the peak of the holy mountain. How could they still have the slightest bit of fighting spirit? Now, they could only hope that the sect master of the Bloodsword sect would show himself and kill the intruders. Unfortunately, it had already happened for a quarter of an hour. 80% of the 500 guards were killed, leaving only 100 or so. The enemy fleet was also closing in on the sacred mountain and was about to reach the peak. Even now, the sect master of the Bloodsword sect still hadn't appeared. Even the elders and consecrators of the sect did not show up. This caused the surviving guards to feel extremely dejected and hopeless. Right at this moment, angry shouts suddenly came from the 2 great halls on the mountain peak. The guards turned their heads to look and saw 2 groups of disciples wearing red robes and holding swords rushing to the square as fast as lightning. There were nearly 100 people in the 2 groups, all of them elite disciples of the Bloodsword sect. Their strength had all reached the 6th level of the celestial god realm or above. The quite a few disciples leading the group were all half-step divine lord realms. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, you dare barge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and offend the might of our sect. You're seeking your own death. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, I'll make sure you die without a grave today. The half-step divine lord disciples stood at the front of the group, facing off against the people of the Bloodblade sect. They roared with surging killing intent, their faces filled with fighting spirit. There was not the slightest bit of fear. Left emissary Jin coldly looked at them and barked, "Where's Lin Shan? Tell him to come out and die." Among the strongest disciples, the leader was a tall and sturdy man with a square face and a full beard on his chin. He held a heavy black iron sword with both hands and looked at left emissary Jin arrogantly. He replied, "You despicable bastards don't have the right to see our sect master." Left emissary Jin frowned and sneered, "Your sect master is probably not in the sect right now. He's still in the distant mountains, right?" The moment he said that, the people of the Bloodblade sect all sneered and mocked him. The chief disciple's expression immediately changed. The elite disciples also had ugly expressions and retorted, However, their retorts were rather weak. They clearly lacked confidence. This made the people of the Bloodblade sect even more certain that the sect master of the Bloodsword sect was not in the sect, but in the mountains. In terms of scheming, the Bloodblade sect was better. The Bloodsword sect was already in an extremely passive position. However, the chief disciple was unwilling to yield. He roared, "You're the left emissary of the Bloodblade sect and a divine lord expert who has been famous for many years. Don't you feel ashamed bullying us juniors? If the Bloodblade sect has any backbone, send your disciples to fight. If I don't beat your young disciples to the ground, I'll wring my own head off." This chief disciple was extremely confident and his tone was extremely domineering. The nearly 100 disciples of the Bloodsword sect all felt elated. They looked at the people of the Bloodblade sect with provocative expressions. As for the young disciples of the Bloodblade sect, they were all enraged. All of them rubbed their fists, wanting nothing more than to draw their blades and fight. Even Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left emissary Jin were hesitant. It was true that they were all veteran divine lords who had been famous for many years. If they personally fought against the disciples of the Bloodsword sect, it would be beneath their dignity. It would also be tantamount to admitting that the disciples of the Bloodblade sect were inferior to the disciples of the Bloodsword sect. However, if they really sent their disciples to fight against the disciples of the Bloodsword sect, it would take a lot of time. Just as the three of them were hesitating, Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered disdainfully. "Little brat, do you think we're here to visit the Bloodsword sect and exchange pointers with you? This lord has come to exterminate the Bloodsword sect." As he sneered, he formed a hand seal with his right hand and sent out a dazzling golden sword light at the chief disciple. The sword light shot out like lightning. The chief disciple was enveloped by the sword intent, and his body stiffened in place. He was unable to dodge or run. Boom! With a muffled explosion, the half-step divine lord chief disciple was struck by the dazzling golden sword light and exploded into a rain of blood. He had been instantly killed. Not only had his body been reduced to a rain of blood, but his godhead had also been reduced to dust. A few disciples who were close to him had their heads and faces splashed with blood. They were so stunned that they forgot to wipe the blood off their faces. Their eyes were red with grief and indignation as they glared at Ji Tianxing. You vicious bastard. As a divine lord, you actually dared to attack a junior disciple. You have no shame. You executioner. Our sect will not live under the same sky as you." The disciples of the Bloodsword sect were enraged. They glared at Ji Tianxing with murderous intent as they roared and cursed. Ji Tianxing expressionlessly said, "Childish." He once more waved his palms, sending out sword light that blotted out the sky. End of this chapter. Chapter 2982. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The dazzling golden sword light that covered the sky fell from the sky like a rain of arrows. At least 50 Bloodsword sect disciples were enveloped by the dazzling golden sword lights. These people were immediately filled with horror. Their faces turned pale as they scattered in all directions in fear. Even the 40 or so nearby disciples that weren't enveloped by the sword lights subconsciously retreated. Bam! 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 Of the 50 or so Bloodsword sect disciples, there were a few lucky ones who managed to escape the range of the sword light and keep their lives. However, the remaining 50 disciples were all killed by the sword lights. Blood and flesh splattered as sword lights flashed. After the dust and the rain of blood dispersed, a deep pit could be seen on the ground. Many bones, weapons, and armor fragments were scattered in the pit. There were also some fragments of godheads. The 50 disciples that were lucky enough to survive were all intimidated by Ji Tianxing's might and were both furious and terrified. They didn't dare to gather together, so they scattered and pointed at Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin, and the others as they cursed. "You bastards who deserve to die by 1,000 cuts, you will all die a horrible death. Even if we are killed today, we will never submit. We were born as members of the Bloodsword sect and we will die as ghosts of the Bloodsword sect. We will never be defeated. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, the sect master will definitely avenge us. It won't be long before the sect master cuts you to pieces and returns today's hatred tenfold." These disciples knew that they would definitely die today. Not to mention the many divine lords and disciples of the Bloodblade sect, just Ji Tianxing alone could easily kill them all. All they could do was straighten their backs and straighten their chests. Even if they were killed on the spot, they would die with dignity and not tarnish the reputation of the Bloodsword sect. Of course, if possible, they would also like to stall for time. At the same time, Xue Huan, Xue Long, and Left Emissary Jin waved their hands and gave the order to attack. What are you waiting for? Open fire. The sect master of the Bloodsword sect isn't here. Let's use this opportunity to destroy the Bloodsword sect. Destroy their sacred mountain and the dragon blood forbidden land. The three of them roared furiously. The 18 divine warships obeyed the order and blasted out divine cannons and fiery light pillars that blotted out the sky. Boom, boom, boom. At least 500 beams of dazzling multicolored divine light and dark red flames streaked across the sky and blasted towards the mountain peak. The mountain peaks within a radius of dozens of miles were covered by the divine cannons. If this batch of divine cannons were to land, the mountain peak would be torn apart. Many palaces and buildings would also be razed to the ground. As for the 50 disciples and 100 blood-armored guards, there was no way they would be spared either. He would definitely be crushed to pieces and turned into ashes. The cannons and divine light that blotted out the sky had already enveloped the peak of the mountain. In the next moment, the mountain peak would be razed to the ground. At this critical moment, the sound of a sword piercing through gold and splitting stone suddenly erupted from the Blood Kenshin Hall in the middle of the mountain peak. Clang! The crisp but unpleasant sword chime seemed to tear the sky and space apart. In the blink of an eye, a huge blood-red sword that was thousands of feet tall flew out of the temple and into the sky. Hum! The blood-red sword radiated a boundless bloody light that instantly enveloped the entire mountain. The dozens of palaces and buildings on the mountain peak, the 50 disciples, and the 100 guards were all enveloped by the bloody light. The bloody light was like a canopy or an inverted bowl that protected the mountain peak. Boom, 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 boom. More than 500 cannons and light pillars viciously blasted the bloody canopy, creating thunderous booms that shook the heavens. Countless people were dizzy from the loud booms. The weaker disciples were even shaken to the point of bleeding from their ears. The entire mountain shook violently, and countless rocks and stones collapsed halfway up the mountain. The light pillars and cannons that filled the sky all collapsed, splashing out fragments of divine light that blotted out the sky. The bloody canopy, however, was undamaged. It only trembled a few dozen times before calming down. On the mountain peak plaza, many guards and disciples looked up at the bloody canopy with incredulous expressions. After a moment of daze, they came back to their senses and cheered excitedly. We're not dead. We're saved. Ha ha ha, the sacred sword saved us. It must be the sect master. The sect master is back. After 1,000 years, the sacred sword has finally appeared. The mighty sect master. The disciples and guards of the Bloodsword sect all knew that the sacred mountain contained a bloody sacred sword, the #1 divine artifact of the sect. Ever since the Bloodsword sect had been established, it had never encountered a calamity or great calamity. Thus, the mysterious bloody sword had never appeared before. In their words, the Bloodsword sect had yet to encounter a powerful enemy worthy of using the sacred sword. But today, at the moment of life and death for the Bloodsword sect, the mysterious bloody sword had finally appeared. How could the disciples and guards of the Bloodsword sect not be wild with joy? Ang! The bloody canopy was still there, and the 1,000-jong-tall blood-red sword floated at the top of the canopy, flickering with a blazing bloody light. Ji Tianxing, Left Emissary Jin, and all the members of the Bloodblade sect looked up at the bloody sword with complicated expressions. Ji Tianxing's eyes were sharp as he carefully observed the sword. He really wanted to know what was so special about the bloody sword that God Monarch Blood Illusion was so afraid of. On the other hand, God Monarch Blood Illusion, Left Emissary Jin, and the others revealed deep fear and anxiety. After all, it was a supreme monarch-level divine artifact. If the bloody sword continued to protect the sacred mountain, even if the 18 divine ships used all their strength, they might not be able to break through the defense of the bloody sword. The battlefield suddenly calmed down. The members of the Bloodsword sect rejoiced, but the atmosphere of the Bloodblade sect was very solemn. At this moment, the 1,000-jong-tall blood-red sword suddenly flashed with a purple light. Whoosh! A black-robed figure more than 3 jong tall stepped out of the bloody sword. He stood in the sky, exuding a powerful divine might and domineering aura. He stood in the sky and appeared before everyone. The gazes of countless people fell on him in unison. It was a handsome God clan member dressed in black robes. His face was handsome and demonic, and his skin was as white as jade, devoid of blood. He had a pair of elf-like pointy ears and a dark red mark of a bloody sword on his forehead. His purple eyes were emotionless as he indifferently scanned the crowd. In the end, his gaze fell on Ji Tianxing, Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, and left emissary Jin. Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, you really came. However, that demoness Lin Shui didn't come. How dare trash like you charge into the dragon blood forbidden ground? The black-robed god race member said indifferently. His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly spread throughout the area and entered everyone's mind. There was no anger in his tone, but it contained frightening confidence and domineering power. Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, and left emissary Jin all had solemn expressions as they hurriedly sent messages to Ji Tianxing. It's the sect master of the Bloodsword sect. His Lin Shan. It looks like his strength has improved again. He's not far from the 8th level of the Divine Lord realm. Chapter 2983. Actually, there was no need for left emissary Jin and the other two to remind him. Ji Tianxing could also guess that the black-robed Divine Lord was the master of the Bloodsword sect, Lin Shan. After all, this person had walked out of the Bloodsword and had the powerful aura of a high Divine Lord. The disciples and guards of the Bloodsword sect all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the master of the Bloodsword sect. As for the 10-odd divine lords and hundreds of experts of the Bloodblade sect, they all felt a great pressure. Everyone gripped their weapons tightly as they stared at the master of the Bloodsword sect solemnly. Divine Lord Blood Illusion stepped forward and said in a deep voice, Lin Shan, after 300 years, we meet again. Even though your strength has improved, it's useless. You're the only one left in the dragon blood forbidden land. No matter how strong you are, you can't defeat so many divine lords and experts. Even if the master doesn't come, we can easily kill you. Stop resisting stubbornly, just admit defeat and surrender. With Divine Lord Blood Illusion's reminder, the people of the Bloodblade sect felt much more at ease and regained their confidence. They were just intimidated by the name of the master of the Bloodsword sect and instinctively felt uneasy and fearful. But it was different now. The Bloodblade sect had the advantage in numbers while the master of the Bloodsword sect was alone. No matter how strong he was, he could not withstand the attacks of so many experts. He would definitely die, so what was there to be afraid of? The master of the Bloodsword sect stared at Divine Lord Blood Illusion as a disdainful sneer appeared on his lips. Blood Illusion, have you forgotten the pain of that sword strike 1,000 years ago? Every time we meet, I have to remind you that it was that sword strike that caused you to lose your divine body forever. You will never be able to recover. Divine Lord Blood Illusion's most painful and infuriating memories were evoked. He roared in a deep voice, Lin Shan, you despicable and shameless bastard. You won't be happy for long. Soon, you will die under my sword. At that time, I'll definitely burn your bones and scatter your ashes, and make you suffer all kinds of pain and torment. Ha 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 ha. The master of the Bloodsword sect raised his head and laughed. He said in a disdainful tone, I said that only that which Lin Shui is qualified to fight with me. No matter how many of you there are, you're still a bunch of trash. You're only fit to be nourishment for my sword. As he spoke, he manipulated the blood-red greatsword and released an overwhelming slaughter sword intent. Buzz! A layer of blood-red killing intent visible to the naked eye spread out like ripples, covering a radius of several hundred miles. Many of the Sir Gods and experts of the Bloodblade sect were swept by the blood-red killing intent. Immediately, their bodies shook violently as they revealed intense fear. That terrifying killing intent caused the illusion of hell to appear in everyone's minds. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, and their bodies were cold. For a moment, the fighting spirit of the Bloodblade sect's members was extinguished, and their fear of the sect master of the Bloodsword sect grew. The Bloodsword sect master became even more pleased with himself when he saw this. He sneered in disdain. Ha ha ha. An ant will always be an ant. Everyone was speechless. Only Ji Tianxing remained calm and indifferent from the beginning to the end. Even the terrifying killing intent released by the blood sword did not affect him at all. Seeing that the blood sword sect master's aura had suppressed everyone else, he took a step forward and said with an indifferent expression, Lin Shan, your performance ends here. The more you bluff, the more it proves that you have a guilty conscience. The moment he said this, countless gazes gathered on him. The blood sword sect master also frowned as he stared coldly at Ji Tianxing. Brat, you are Tianxing? Although he had never seen Ji Tianxing before, he was Ji Tianxing's archenemy. However, Ji Tianxing was a mortal enemy of the blood sword sect. He had seen Ji Tianxing's portrait long ago, so he could recognize him. You're just a coward who doesn't even dare to go to the desolate mountain range. What right do you have to slander me? The blood sword sect master sneered, his face filled with disdain. Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, I didn't go to the desolate mountain range because I already knew everything and predicted that you would stay behind in the dragon blood forbidden land. Thus, I directly charged into the dragon blood forbidden land and took your head. As for those small fries in the desolate mountain range, I'll catch them all in one fell swoop after killing you. The blood sword sect master was stunned for a moment before he burst into wild laughter. Ha ha ha, no matter how you quibble, you can't hide the fact that you're a coward. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with pity, Lin Shan, you're the blood sword sect master. How could you fall to the point of pretending to be crazy? I saw through your tricks and am already in front of you, about to take your dog life. Yet you're still stubborn and say that I'm a coward. What kind of logic is that? The blood sword sect master was speechless and could only frown and stare at him with a malicious gaze. Ji Tianxing continued, in front of me, don't use your little tricks to embarrass yourself. In fact, you don't have any confidence at all. The only reason you're spouting nonsense is to stall for time. You're waiting for your subordinates to return to the dragon blood forbidden land to help you. However, they're all blocking me in the desolate mountain range and won't be able to return in a few days. Moreover, they can't build a teleportation array in the desolate mountain range. Firstly, the price is too great. Secondly, it would take too much time. If I'm not wrong, they must have a divine artifact. A divine artifact that contains the laws of space and can travel through space. The people from the Bloodblade sect nodded when they heard Ji Tianxing's words. They felt like they had come to a sudden realization. However, the blood sword sect master's expression changed subtly. A hint of shock flashed through his eyes, and he found it hard to believe. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, then continued, the spatial divine artifact that your subordinates can control is at most high monarch grade. If you can fit all the divine lords and experts and bring more than 4,000 people through space, you'll need to spend a lot of resources and time. Let me guess. The distance between the desolate mountain range and the dragon blood forbidden land is more than 10 million kilometers. That divine artifact might need to travel 3 times and spend several billion divine stones to return to the dragon blood forbidden land. Even if they receive your orders and rush back as quickly as possible, they'll still need 2 hours. What you need to do is to put on a show and stall for 2 hours. Once all your lackeys return, you'll have a chance to turn the tables. This monarch guessed correctly, right? After saying this, Ji Tianxing smirked at the blood sword sect master and said, unfortunately, you won't be able to wait for them to come back. In 2 hours, you'll be dead, and the dragon blood forbidden land will be reduced to ruins. The disciples and guards of the blood sword sect were all dumbfounded and looked at each other. As for the divine lords and disciples of the blood sword sect, they all breathed a sigh of relief as if a great burden had been lifted from their shoulders. There was a burst of discussion in the crowd. No wonder the people of the blood sword sect all ran to the desolate mountain range, leaving only the blood sword sect master to guard the sect. No wonder the blood sword sect dared to do this. They have a spatial divine artifact that allows them to quickly come back. How did young Master Tianxing know a secret that even our sect doesn't know? If this is all young Master Tianxing's speculation, doesn't that mean he can predict the future? Just how terrifying is his intelligence and strategy? No wonder young Master Tianxing insisted on attacking the dragon blood forbidden land. He saw through everything long ago. The divine lords and disciples of the Blood Sword sect felt even more reverence and admiration for Ji Tianqing. They suddenly felt that with young Master Tianqing's help, the Blood Sword sect was nothing to fear. Ever since the start of the war, the Blood Sword sect had never been defeated. This was the best proof. Moreover, their fear of the Blood Sword sect master lessened, and the shadow in their hearts dissipated. The fighting spirit that had previously dissipated was ignited once more. Chapter 2984. The Blood Sword sect master's plan had been exposed, and his heart was in turmoil. He stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief, his eyes almost spitting fire. He had never thought that Ji Tianqing would guess his thoughts and plan. Even the spatial artifact and the time the experts of the Blood Sword sect would return was completely correct. It was as if Ji Tianqing could read his mind and read his thoughts and memories. At this moment, the Blood Sword sect master was even more wary of Ji Tianqing. He even felt a trace of fear in his heart, almost demonic in intelligence. These words suddenly appeared in the Blood Sword sect master's mind. This was his evaluation of Ji Tianqing. However, even if he had been exposed in front of everyone, he couldn't show his fear. After calming himself down, he still laughed contemptuously. Ha ha ha. You little bastard, you're quite good at deceiving people. Your story is quite convincing. However, even if you have a glib tongue, it's useless. Today's battle still depends on strength. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more time. He sneered. That's right. There's no point in talking. Let's fight. After saying this, he sent a message to Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin. Leave the Blood Sword sect master to me. Protect me and let them surround and kill the remaining members of the Blood Sword sect. Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin hurriedly nodded and followed him to the peak of the sacred mountain. At the same time, left emissary Jin gave orders to the 18 god lords. The 18 god lords personally piloted the battleships and fired at the blood-colored light barrier. This great battle with a great disparity in numbers had finally begun. Boom, boom, boom. Hundreds of cannon fire and light pillars rained down on the blood-colored light barrier like a storm. Xue Huan, left emissary Jin, and left emissary Jin also used their ultimate skills to slash at the blood-colored light barrier. Ji Tianqing even took out the Burial of Heaven and used his trump card, turning into a 1,000-foot-tall golden-armored war god. Heaven-splitting sword. He unleashed all of his power, holding the 800-meter-long Burial of Heaven sword with both hands, and slashed at the blood-red sky with all his might. Sensing his powerful divine might, the Blood Sword sect master's expression changed. He hurriedly used a secret technique to activate the Blood Sword's power. Buzz. The crimson sky began to tremble, and the crimson light became even denser. Its defensive power also doubled. The fear and unease in the hearts of the disciples and guards of the Blood Sword sect gradually disappeared. Under the lead of a few elite disciples, they all rushed to the main hall not far away to activate various divine arrays. They wanted to use the formation to help the sect master of the Blood Sword sect block the attacks of the Bloodblade sect. Boom. An earth-shattering boom suddenly exploded between the heavens and the earth. The giant sword of Burial of Heaven, which was 8,000 feet long, slashed into the blood-colored sky, sending shards of blood-colored light flying everywhere. The 5-colored giant sword collapsed, and countless fragments of divine light splattered everywhere. But, a 10,000-foot-long crack was slashed open in the blood-red skies. Strength crazily leaked out. The blood-colored giant sword hovering in the sky crazily trembled and actually let out a sorrowful cry. The Blood Sword sect master's mind was connected to the blood sword. The blood sword had been damaged, and he felt a stabbing pain in his heart. He let out a pained grunt. However, he felt even more shock and disbelief in his heart. Damn it! Where did that little bastard's sword come from? How could it damage this lord's blood sword? The blood sword had always been the life-bound divine artifact that he was most proud of. The way he saw it, the blood sword was a peak-quality divine artifact. After being refined by the blood-exchanging technique for 1,000 years, he had become one with the blood sword. This allowed the blood sword's quality and power to reach a whole new level. It was very close to a king-grade divine artifact. Unless a true king-grade divine artifact attacked, no divine artifact could shake his blood sword. But now, his pride had been shattered. The blood sword sect master suppressed his shock and formed hand seals with both hands, fully activating the power of the blood sword. The crack in the crimson sky was quickly repaired. However, the 18 battleships and the 3 Sir God experts continued their relentless attacks. Ji Tianxing held the burial of heaven with both hands and slashed down with all his strength. Heavenly Dragon World slash. Ji Tianxing roared as golden light surged out of his body. The burial of heaven also released a dazzling golden light, forming a 1,000-foot-long golden dragon that slashed at the sky. Boom! Crack! Another deafening explosion occurred at the peak of the holy mountain. A 10-mile-long gap was created in the blood-red sky, and shards of debris flew everywhere. The entire holy mountain shook violently, and several ravines appeared on the mountain. Countless rocks collapsed. Violent shockwaves swept up the dark red shards, creating a bloody flood in the sky. PFFF, the blood sword sect master, was also injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. The giant blood sword trembled, and a bloody light flashed crazily. Damn it! The blood sword sect master cursed angrily. He didn't care about healing his injuries and entered the blood sword without hesitation. Whoosh! With a flash of purple light, he fused with the giant blood sword. He used all his strength to use his ultimate skill, vowing to maintain the bloody sky and protect the blood sword sect. No matter what, I have to hold on for 2 hours until reinforcements return. At that time, I will kill everyone in the Bloodblade sect, not leaving even a chicken or a dog alive. Especially Tianxing. I'm going to extract his divine soul and torture him for 1,000 years. Only then will I be appeased. The blood sword sect master roared in his heart as he activated the power of the blood sword. Soon, Ji Tianxing slashed out a 3rd time with all his strength. Sword piercing 9 heavens. He bellowed in a loud voice. Holding the Heavenpiercer sword with both hands, he fiercely thrust out his strongest sword. A dazzling golden sword light cut through the sky like a blazing sun and landed on the mountain peak, slashing at the bloody sky. The hole in the bloody sky didn't have time to heal in the first place. After being slashed by the divine golden sword, it could no longer hold on. Boom! Crack! Following a loud explosion that shook the universe, the gap was instantly torn apart. The hole extended to both ends and actually expanded tenfold, reaching a length of 10,000 feet. Moreover, countless cracks appeared around the hole, scattering countless fragments of bloody light. After a few breaths, a hole with a radius of 15 miles appeared. The bloody sky could no longer hold on after suffering such a heavy blow and soon fell apart. The blood sword wailed fiercely, flickering with bloody light. The blood sword sect master was also heavily injured, his divine power greatly reduced. No. How can I lose to him? The blood sword sect master cried in his heart, filled with grief and indignation. But it was too late. Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin, and Godlord Blood Illusion were the first to pass through the huge hole and reach the peak of the holy mountain. The 4 experts began a massacre, using earth-shattering divine abilities to cover the buildings on the mountain peak. Rumble. With a deafening explosion, the wide square and more than 20 magnificent palaces were blasted into ruins. Even the 50 disciples and more than 100 guards who had just fled the ruins in panic were killed by Ji Tianxing in 3 slashes. The 18 godlords controlled the divine battleships to unleash a barrage of cannon fire and light beams that rained down on the mountain peak. As a result, the entire mountain peak became a scene of desolation and chaos. Chapter 2985. In just 100 breaths, the Saint Mountain was blasted into pieces. The palaces and buildings on the mountain peak were all destroyed. The Saint Mountain, which was originally 1,000 feet tall, was now a 3,000 feet tall ruin. Many of the treasuries of the Blood Sword sect, as well as the secret passages and rooms inside the mountain, were also destroyed. The loss of the Blood Sword sect was immeasurable. It would be difficult for them to recover in 50 years. However, the earth-shattering battle was not over yet. The sky within a few hundred miles was still filled with smoke and dust. 18 divine lords surrounded the ruins of the Saint Mountain in their battleships and continued to bombard it. The goal of the Bloodblade sect was not as simple as destroying the Saint Mountain. They also wanted to raze the Saint Mountain to the ground and not leave a single intact stone for the Bloodsword sect. In the sky above the ruins, Ji Tianxing, Xue Huan, Xue Long and left emissary Jin were attacking the Bloodsword with all their might. The Bloodsword sect master had fused with the Bloodsword. It looked like a giant bloodsword that was 1,000 feet tall. Showing off his ability, the bloody light soared to the heavens. The Bloodsword was extremely ghostly and nimble. It flashed and shuttled in the sky. Only Ji Tianxing could catch the trajectory of the Bloodsword and block its attack. Xue Huan, Xue Long and left emissary Jin could not defend against it. In the last moment, the Bloodsword had brushed past Divine Lord Xue Huan and sent him flying. The next moment, the Bloodsword appeared behind left emissary Jin. Left emissary Jin was shocked. He subconsciously teleported and dodged the Bloodsword's attack. However, 2 of the hundreds of dark red sword chi released by the Bloodsword hit him and made 2 bloody holes in his right leg. Left emissary Jin groaned in pain. Seeing this, Divine Lord Xue Long immediately teleported over to help him block the Bloodsword's attack. However, the Bloodsword crossed 50 miles and appeared above Divine Lord Xue Long's head and slashed down. Divine Lord Xue Long did not have time to dodge and was about to be cut in half. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing teleported over and blocked the Bloodsword's attack. In just 30 breaths, the 2 sides had exchanged more than 200 blows. Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin were all wounded by the Bloodsword. Their god power was drained rapidly, and their fighting abilities were weakening rapidly. The Bloodsword, on the other hand, was galloping freely between heaven and earth, flashing back and forth. The divine ability killer moves of the 3 divine lords could not harm the Bloodsword at all. Only Ji Tianxing was able to threaten the Bloodsword, injuring it 3 times and weakening its power a bit. However, the sect master of the Bloodsword sect was very smart and avoided Ji Tianxing as much as possible. His main targets were Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin. He wanted to kill the 3 monarchs first before slowly dealing with Ji Tianxing. In any case, the surrounding 10,000 miles were all forbidden dragon blood grounds with special standpoints. In this area, the Bloodsword could communicate with the divine power of heaven and earth, as well as the scattered divine dragon power in the ground. It could be said that his power was limitless and inexhaustible. As long as the Bloodsword was not defeated, the sect master of the Bloodsword sect would be invincible. Soon, both sides exchanged over 100 moves. God Lord Xue Long and left emissary Jin were injured twice by the Bloodsword, and their injuries were even more miserable. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing decisively sent a voice transmission to the 3 monarchs. "I will deal with the Bloodsword. You guys retreat to the outer circle and form a formation to defend. Don't let him escape." Xue Long, God Lord Xue Huan, and left emissary Jin already had this idea. However, they did not want to let Ji Tianxing fight alone because they wanted to save face. Thus, they did not say anything. Since Ji Tianxing took the initiative to suggest it, the 3 of them naturally agreed. They sent a voice transmission in unison. "Thank you, young Master Tianxing, for your understanding. Young Master Tianxing, you must be careful. Don't worry, we will definitely not let him escape." Soon, the 3 monarchs retreated from the battlefield to 100 miles away. The 3 of them each took out 12 monarch-grade divine artifacts and inserted them into the ground in all directions, starting to set up a formation together. They were going to set up a Sky Demon space-locking formation to seal an area of 300 miles. This monarch-grade high-grade divine array required at least 2 monarchs to set up and spend 8 days to set it up. However, the 3 monarchs could greatly shorten the time needed to set it up. In addition, the ruins of the sacred mountain had already been reduced to dust, leaving behind only a huge crater. The 18 monarchs and 800 elite experts had nothing to do for the time being. It was obviously unrealistic to expect them to besiege the Bloodsword sect master. Thus, they all took action to help the 3 monarchs set up the formation. With the help of so many experts, the time needed to set up the formation could be shortened by dozens of times. God Lord Xue Huan was confident that he could set up the formation and seal the Bloodsword sect master within 2 hours. Swish, swish, swish. Swish. Everyone worked together and shot out divine light that covered the sky, creating the formation's network on the ground. In a short 30 minutes, the formation's foundation was formed. Then, everyone used all their strength to set up the formation, each of them displaying their strongest abilities. At this time, the battle between Ji Tianxing and the Bloodsword Sect Master had reached its climax. Although Ji Tianxing, who had transformed into a 1,000-meter-tall golden-armored war god, was already covered in wounds, his power was still as strong as ever. However, his power was still as violent as ever, as if he would never tire. As for the 1,000-meter-tall blood-red sword, it was also covered in wounds, with dozens of gaps. The blood-red light that the sword emitted was clearly much dimmer, and the sword intent was not as sharp and powerful as before. Without a doubt, the blood-red sword had been injured by Ji Tianxing, and the injuries were not light. The Bloodsword Sect Master had fused with the blood-red sword, so he was naturally injured as well. The Bloodsword Sect Master could not accept or believe this result. He found it very hard to believe that the monarch-grade high-grade blood-red sword had been injured by Ji Tianxing. This made him very suspicious. What grade was the pitch-black sword in Ji Tianxing's hand? Was it also a supreme-grade monarch-grade sword? Or perhaps, a legendary king-grade divine artifact? Actually, Ji Tianxing was also very puzzled by this question. A long time ago, he had always thought that the Burial of Heaven sword made from origin stones was a heaven-grade divine artifact. After all, origin stones were more powerful than ordinary divine stones, and their origins were mysterious. It was understandable that the Burial of Heaven sword's grade was higher than ordinary true god-grade divine artifacts. However, he only realized after coming to the god realm. The Burial of Heaven sword's grade was not as simple as heavenly god grade. Even if it faced various monarch-grade divine artifacts, it would still be able to forcefully clash with them, and it would not be at a disadvantage. This made Ji Tianxing very surprised. Could it be that the Burial of Heaven sword had become a monarch-grade divine artifact? All these years, the Burial of Heaven had been working hard to recover, and the results were actually so obvious. Today, the Burial of Heaven sword had faced the supreme-grade blood-red sword. It was still not at a disadvantage. Not to mention how much the Burial of Heaven sword was better than the blood-red sword, it was at least evenly matched. Only now did Ji Tianxing realize that the Burial of Heaven sword made from origin stones was actually comparable to a supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifact. Of course, he was 100% sure that the Burial of Heaven sword could only stop at monarch-grade. It was definitely not a king-grade divine artifact. This was because king-grade divine artifacts were very special. They were extremely powerful divine artifacts that contained the principles of the Great Tao. Since it's not a king-grade divine artifact, it's invincible among monarch-grade divine artifacts. In that case, the Burial of Heaven sword should be one of the strongest monarch-grade divine artifact. Chapter 2986. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The battle between Ji Tianxing and Sect Master Bloodsword had long since reached its most intense stage. Both sides had exchanged close to 10,000 moves, and all the divine abilities and skills they could use had been used once. Their divine power had been consumed too intensely, and they were almost completely exhausted. However, both of them were exceptionally talented. One had the support of the Bloodsword and the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, and could still maintain 50% of his strength. The other had the Heaven Mending Pearl and the Five Elements World to replenish his energy, and he would never tire. His divine power was always abundant, and his battle strength was always at its peak. Comparing the two, Sect Master Bloodsword's fate was naturally more miserable. The 3,000-meter-tall Bloodsword was already covered in cracks and gaps, as if it had grown a row of sore teeth. The bloodlight had dimmed, and its power was much weaker than before. In fact, the Bloodsword had become less offensive and more defensive. Most of the time, it was weary of blocking Ji Tianxing's attacks, and occasionally finding an opportunity to counterattack. Based on the current situation, Sect Master Bloodsword would be defeated in an hour at most. At that time, he would definitely die with his sword destroyed. However, Ji Tianxing was not satisfied with this result, and he was still anxious. An hour later, he would be able to defeat the Bloodsword and kill Sect Master Bloodsword. To him, This was simply too slow. Because he had been calculating the time. He had to kill Sect Master Bloodsword before the experts of Sect Master Bloodsword returned. Otherwise, the situation would become even more complicated, and Sect Master Bloodsword might take the opportunity to escape. Unfortunately, no matter how anxious he was, it was useless. Sect Master Bloodsword did not show himself at all, hiding in the Bloodsword like a turtle. Relying on the Bloodsword's protection, he could continue to stall for time. After all, the Bloodsword was a genuine supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifact. It was only 2 hours, so he could hold on no matter what. Soon, another 30 minutes passed. Ji Tianxing's attacks did not weaken at all, and he continued to brandish the Burial of Heaven, sending out sky-covering swordlights to attack the Bloodsword. Sect Master Bloodsword's injuries were even more severe, and he was even weaker. However, he also understood. He had actually given up on resisting and breaking out of the encirclement, and changed to using all his strength to defend and defend. The 3,000-meter-long Bloodsword shrank to about 30 meters and entered the depths of the earth. Under the control of the Bloodsword Sect Master, the Bloodsword released invisible divine power and frantically absorbed the dragon blood divine power in the ground. At the same time, the Bloodsword Sect Master also used his sword Dao divine ability to form an illusory sword net. An oval-shaped dark red sword net floated deep underground. No matter which angle Ji Tianxing attacked from, the sword net was able to block all of them. Even though the net of swords would constantly shatter and collapse if it received too many attacks. However, the sect master of the Bloodsword sect was constantly repairing the sword net and replenishing its defensive power. Even if the sword net would be broken through sooner or later, the Bloodsword would definitely shatter. But by doing so, he could stall for more time. Not to mention 2 hours, even 4 hours would not be a problem. Finally, 2 hours passed. A 7-colored light barrier with a radius of 300 miles appeared between heaven and earth, sealing this area. Shua, Ji Tianxing and the sect master of the Bloodsword sect were both sealed by the 7-colored light barrier. At this moment, Left Emissary Jin's voice sounded in Ji Tianxing's mind. Young Master Tianxing, we've already set up the Celestial Fiend space sealing array and sealed off the area within a radius of 300 miles. Don't worry, we'll maintain the array and not let the Bloodsword sect master escape. Hearing this news, Ji Tianxing only let out a sigh of relief and was not very happy. This was because he could see that the Bloodsword sect master had no intention of escaping. The Bloodsword sect master probably still hadn't given up and wanted to wait for reinforcements to return so that he could make a comeback. The completion of the Celestial Fiend space sealing array only served as a safeguard and did not have any substantial effect. You guys guard the array and prevent the reinforcements from returning. This sovereign will kill the Bloodsword sect master as soon as possible. Ji Tianxing transmitted to Left Emissary Jin. Then, he held the Sword of Burial of Heaven and used his sword Dao divine ability to attack the Bloodsword deep underground. After fighting for so long, Ji Tianxing could already see some clues. The Bloodsword was deep underground and absorbing the mysterious dragon blood energy from the earth. It was precisely because of this that the Bloodsword's energy had not been exhausted, allowing Lin Shan to last until now. Ji Tianxing not only wanted to attack the Bloodsword, but also cut off the dragon blood energy. Thus, he used the Law of Earth and slashed out several giant swords. Bang! 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 With a deafening explosion, the rock layer deep underground was cut into several pieces by the swords. With the Bloodsword as the center, the surroundings were cut open. The rock stratum where the Bloodsword was turned into an isolated island. The connection between the island and the land around it had been severed. It became abnormally difficult for the Bloodsword to absorb the dragon blood energy from the surroundings. This move was indeed effective. The Bloodsword was continuously attacked, and its energy was constantly being consumed. However, it could not be replenished, and its power was rapidly weakening. The Bloodsword sect master's injuries were becoming more and more miserable, and he was becoming more and more anxious. 15 minutes later, the Bloodsword had even more cracks, and its light was even dimmer. The Bloodsword sect master's injuries were also very severe, and he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Ji Tianxing sped up his attacks, wanting to defeat the Bloodsword and kill Lin Shan. But at this moment, outside the dragon blood-forbidden ground, a dazzling white light lit up, and deafening battle cries resounded. The sudden turn of events alarmed everyone in the field. Ji Tianxing hurriedly released his divine sense to investigate the situation several thousand miles away. He saw a 3-story treasure ship that was 10,000 feet long. It was shining with divine light as it sped toward the dragon blood-forbidden ground. This antique treasure ship was extremely ancient in design. It even looked a little shabby and was filled with an ancient aura. The masts and sails of the treasure ship were covered in cracks and holes. One could vaguely see 4,000 to 5,000 gods in different attire on the treasure ship. They came from different races and wore different attire, but they were loyal to the same faction. Most of these people were heavenly gods. They wielded weapons like sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and other strange weapons as they shouted with killing intent. At the top of the treasure ship were more than 20 divine lords in purple, gold, and black robes. They were all aggressive and filled with killing intent. They all held sabers and kenshin weapons in their hands. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned when he saw the appearance of these people. His eyes became serious. Damn it. 2 hours have just passed, and they really came back. The Bloodsword sect master, who was heavily injured, was originally dispirited and suffering greatly in his heart. Suddenly, he heard the battle cries outside the forbidden ground, so he also released his divine sense. When he saw the ancient treasure ship, he immediately became spirited, and his dim eyes suddenly glowed with radiance. Ha 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 ha. You brats really didn't disappoint me. I've held on for so long and finally waited for you to come back. Kill all the bastards of the Bloodblade sect. At the same time, Shui Huan, Divine Lord Blood Dragon, left emissary Jin, and the others also used their divine sense to check the treasure ship. At first, they thought that the Bloodblade sect master had come with the elders and disciples to reinforce them. However, when they clearly saw the appearance of the treasured ship and those people, they immediately widened their eyes in shock and their expressions became extremely unsightly. Chapter 2987. Heavens! It's not the sect master or the elders. Damn it! It's the bastards of the Bloodsword sect. They came back so quickly. Logically speaking, the sect master and the elders should have arrived long ago. Why haven't they appeared yet? Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left emissary Jin were all filled with anxiety and worry. They watched as the ancient treasure ship quickly approached them. In 10 breaths at most, it would reach the Sky Demon spacelock array. Blood Illusion suppressed his shock and ordered, "Don't be in a daze. The reinforcements of the Bloodsword sect have returned. We must fight with all our strength. Block them outside the array. We can't let them stop young Master Tianxing from killing Lin Shan." Blood Dragon and Gold left emissary also calmed down and nodded in agreement. That's right. As long as we block the reinforcements of the Bloodsword sect, young Master Tianxing will be able to kill Lin Shan soon. Once Lin Shan is killed and Bloodsword is destroyed, the Bloodsword sect will be leaderless. Those dogs will also scatter. The 3 divine lords hurriedly ordered the 18 divine lords to fight. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 18 divine lords unsheathed their kenshin weapons and formed a battle formation in the sky, staring at the treasure ship. In addition, more than 600 experts flew out of the 18 battleships and formed a battle formation in the sky. The remaining 200 experts stayed in the 18 battleships. They were responsible for controlling the battleships and forming a battle formation to fight against the treasure ship and the reinforcements of the Bloodsword sect. After a few breaths, the two sides engaged in close combat. The ancient treasure ship stopped when it was 10 miles away from the 7-colored barrier. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 20 god monarchs led more than 4,000 elite experts and flew out of the treasure ship. They split into more than 20 groups and charged at the Bloodblade sect with murderous intent. The bastards of the Bloodblade sect invaded our forbidden grounds, destroyed our sacred mountain, and tried to besiege the sect master. Today, we must kill them all and let their blood flow like a river. Bloodsword sect disciples, listen up. Kill the bastards of the Bloodblade sect at all cost. Anyone who kills one will be rewarded with 100,000 divine stones. Whoever kills the enemy's divine sovereign will be rewarded with a monarch-level divine ability, a divine artifact, and 10 billion divine stone. At the very front of the Blood Sword sect's group were 2 white-haired old men, their voices as loud as bells. They were the first elder and second elder of the Blood Sword sect. Their words greatly motivated the experts of the Blood Sword sect, causing their blood to boil and their fighting spirit to soar. As the saying goes, when there's a great reward, there's bound to be brave men. The sky-high bounty that head elder offered made everyone's eyes turn red from excitement. They became even more ferocious as they charged towards the people of the Bloodblade sect like bloodthirsty demonic beasts. Boom! Peng peng peng! Rumble! In the next moment, both sides clashed fiercely, colliding with each other and exploding with a loud bang. Thousands of divine abilities and secret arts burst forth with dazzling divine light, illuminating the heaven and earth for thousands of miles. All sorts of saber lights, sword shadows, and mountainous beasts clashed in the sky, shattering into pieces. The 18 divine battleships also shot out several hundred beams of light, which rained down on the Bloodsword sect members. Millions of shards of divine light were swept away by the violent shockwaves and scattered in every direction. Chaotic and violent gales swept across the battlefield, sweeping across 3,000 miles. In just a single clash, both sides had suffered massive casualties. More than 60 disciples of the Bloodblade sect had been killed on the spot. The Bloodsword sect's experts had also suffered nearly 100 casualties. However, the auras of the two sides were completely different. The Bloodblade sect had their backs against the celestial demon spatial lock array. They could only resist the charge of the Bloodsword sect, unable to retreat. Moreover, the number of enemies they were facing was 5 times their number. Unless a miracle occurred, they would undoubtedly lose this battle. Moreover, all of them would die on the spot. On the other hand, the Bloodsword sect's casualties were even heavier, but their morale was as high as a rainbow, their killing intent soaring. They had only suffered nearly 100 casualties, while they had more than 4,000 people. Even if they maintained this casualty rate, they would be able to quickly kill off the Bloodblade sect members. Once the Bloodblade sect members were all dead, they would still have 3,000 people left. What was there to fear? This was an unfair battle to begin with. Boom boom boom. Peng peng peng. The bitter battle continued. Over 40 divine lord powerhouses from both sides were fighting high up in the sky. The celestial god realm disciples and experts, on the other hand, were charging and breaking through the enemy lines at low altitudes. Even though the 600 disciples of the Bloodblade sect had 18 divine ships supporting them, they had relied on the power of the divine ships to block the first 3 waves of attacks from the Bloodsword sect. However, when the Bloodsword sect's experts controlled the ships and unleashed a barrage of divine cannons, the Bloodblade sect's disciples suffered a calamity. With each passing second, the number of Bloodblade sect disciples rapidly decreased. Corpses after corpses were blasted to pieces by the divine light, causing a rain of blood to splatter. The Bloodblade sect's disciples grew more and more terrified, their fighting intent constantly dwindling. After 10 breaths of time, they had lost more than 200 people. The remaining 400 disciples were completely suppressed and could only do their utmost to resist. Seeing this, the Bloodsword sect's disciples became even more arrogant and charged even more valiantly. High in the sky, Divine Lord Blood Illusion's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw this. He anxiously shouted, "Left Emissary Jin, quickly ask young Master Tianxing why he still hasn't killed Lin Shan. Our disciples won't be able to last much longer. They'll all be killed soon." Left Emissary Jin was also anxious. He hurriedly replied, "That old bastard Lin Shan is hiding in the Bloodsword sect. Young Master Tianxing can't do anything to him. Even if young Master Tianxing uses all his strength, he'll still need an hour to kill him." An hour? Divine Lord Blood Dragon felt his vision darken. He was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. By that time, our disciples will have all been killed. Even the 3 of us will be surrounded by thousands of people from the Bloodsword sect. We won't be able to keep our lives. Left Emissary Jin was in a dilemma. He tried asking, "Then what do we do? We can't ask young Master Tianxing to give up on Lin Shan and help us block the reinforcements of the Bloodsword sect, right? Impossible. Divine Lord Blood Illusion shouted resolutely and angrily, "Don't forget that our original intention of establishing the Bloodblade sect was to kill Lin Shan. As long as we can kill that old dog, we won't hesitate to sacrifice the entire Bloodblade sect." Left Emissary Jin was startled. He felt great pain in his heart. His eyes were filled with hesitation and struggle. At this moment, at the edge of the forbidden area thousands of miles away, a five-colored divine light that blotted out the sky lit up again. There was a vast and vigorous divine power that was approaching them at lightning speed. Many divine lords sensed the abnormality and released their divine senses to investigate. The next moment, they discovered that there was a divine ship as black as ink at the edge of the forbidden area. It was speeding over at lightning speed. There was clearly a huge symbol of the Bloodblade on the ferocious-looking divine ship. Seeing this scene, the experts of the Bloodsword sect frowned. Their expressions became grave and fearful. As for Divine Lord Blood Illusion, Blood Dragon, and Left Emissary Jin, they heaved a sigh of relief. They were pleasantly surprised. Ha 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 ha. Sect Master has finally arrived. Great. Sect Master has finally arrived. Those bastards of the Bloodsword sect are dead for sure. Mobile version update website, M. Chapter 2988. The divine ship that had arrived late was the Bloodblade sect master's ship. It rarely showed its face. However, it was a genuine monarch-grade high-grade divine ship. In a short 5 breaths, it arrived near the 7-colored barrier and above the battlefield. Bam! 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 Before the people on the divine ship had even appeared, countless cannons fired hundreds of scarlet flame pillars. Each scarlet flame pillar was 3,000 feet long and contained enough power to destroy heaven and earth. Boom! 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 Scarlet pillars of light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth rained down on the Bloodsword sect's battle formation. The ancient ship was engulfed, and the 300 or so elites were also swallowed by the scarlet flames. Along with an earth-shattering explosion, a loud noise burst out. A few enormous holes were blasted open on the ancient treasured vessel on the spot, causing fragments to spray out into the sky, and it was on the verge of collapse. 80% of the 300 or so elites were killed on the spot. Only a few dozen experts were still alive, but all of them had severed limbs, and their injuries were horrible to look at. The morale of the Bloodsword sect took a huge hit. On the other hand, the disciples of the Bloodblade sect cheered and cheered. At this moment, a large group of figures flew out of the black divine ship. There were 6 god lords and over 1,000 sky god realm experts. The person in the lead was a graceful figure with a head full of white hair. She had a beautiful face and a seductive temperament. She had the appearance of a 28-year-old girl, the charm and gentleness of a 30-year-old girl, and the dignity and vicissitudes of a middle-aged woman. In short, her temperament was very complicated and special. She was wearing a long purple dress, and her bare feet were like jade as she walked through the air. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, and her waist-length white hair danced in the wind. She was indescribably bewitching and beautiful. She held a blood-colored saber that was 10 feet long and shaped like a crescent moon in her hands. This saber had a very special shape and contained a frightening and mysterious aura. The smooth arc of the blade flickered with a translucent blood-red light, as if it was alive. Everyone on the battlefield had complicated expressions when they saw the white-haired woman and the blood-colored saber. The people of the Bloodsword sect were extremely wary, while the people of the Bloodblade sect cheered. Because she was the leader of the Bloodblade sect. The outside world had many guesses about her and gave her many nicknames. White-haired demon blade, Bloodblade demonis, Bloodblade demonis, Bloodthirsty demonis, and so on. It was obvious. None of the nicknames were positive. All of them were promoting her cruelty, bloodthirstiness, and viciousness. As expected, demonic blade Xuelin streaked across the sky like a bloody light, heading straight for the Sky Demon space ceiling array. Those who block me, die. With a roar filled with killing intent, she waved the blood saber in her hand and slashed out dozens of blood-colored blades of light at the 100 Bloodsword sect disciples in front of her. The hundreds of disciples who had formed a battle formation had no time to dodge. Peng peng peng, a series of muffled sounds exploded, and everyone was shredded into pieces by the blood-red light blade. A dark red rain of blood fell from the sky, emitting a nauseating stench of blood. Demon Blade Lin Shui didn't dodge. She passed through the blood rain and continued to rush towards the seven-colored light shield. Another 3 Sir Gods blocked her path. She held the blood saber with both hands and turned it into a bloody hurricane, violently sweeping over. Peng peng peng. The bloody hurricane violently crushed the Sir Gods of the Bloodsword sect, causing their flesh and blood to splatter everywhere. They screamed and flew backwards. One of them was killed on the spot, his godhead shattered. The other 3 were lucky not to die, but they were severely injured and their bodies were incomplete. Swish. Demon Blade Lin Shui finally crossed the sky and landed beside Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jin. Sir Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jin were filled with excitement as they hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Sect Master. Sect Master, you're finally here. Demon Blade Lin Shui didn't exchange greetings with them and directly asked in a deep voice, "How's the situation? Where's young Master Tianxing?" Left Emissary Jin hurriedly explained, "We can't help young Master Tianxing deal with Lin Shan, so we set up the Sky Demon Space Sealing Array and sealed off the surrounding 300 miles. Lin Shan, that old dog, is holed up in the Blood Sword, planning to resist until the end. Young Master Tianxing can't do anything to him for the time being. He needs at least an hour to defeat the Blood Sword and kill Lin Shan." Even so, Lin Shui was still shocked when she heard this. Her silver eyes were filled with disbelief. He actually won against Lin Shan in a one-on-one battle? He forced Lin Shan to hold up in the Blood Sword? That's right. Young Master Tianxing is far stronger than we imagined. Sir Blood Illusion hurriedly said, "Sect Master, enter the array and help young Master Tianxing kill Lin Shan. With the help of the elders, reverends, and disciples, we can block the reinforcements of the Bloodsword sect." Lin Shui glanced back. A few elders and consecrators were leading thousands of experts to fight bravely. More than 30 disciples stayed in the divine ship and were crazily bombarding the Bloodsword sect's battle array. Although the Bloodsword sect had thousands of people, they were surrounded by enemies and their morale was unstable. The Bloodblade sect could hold on for a short period of time. Thus, Lin Shui nodded and said, "Okay, hold on for a while longer. I'll go and kill that useless dog Lin Shan now." After saying this, she passed through the 7-colored light barrier and entered the array. As soon as she entered the array, she saw that the ground within 300 miles had turned into ruins. The once majestic sacred mountain was gone, and all she could see were deep pits and ravines. This made her very excited and happy. She hurriedly released her divine sense to search for traces of Ji Tianxing and Lin Shan. In the end, Ji Tianxing and the Blood Sword were fighting deep underground. The Blood Sword had shrunk to about 10 feet, and its light was dim. It was very weak. Ji Tianxing's aura was still as imposing as before. His divine power was abundant, and his battle prowess was formidable. Seeing the situation, Lin Shui was even more shocked. Her silver eyes seemed to see through the earth as she stared at Ji Tianxing. Heavens! What is this kid's background? He had fought Lin Shan one-on-one and had only suffered light injuries. He was still in peak condition. But he severely injured Lin Shan and only relied on the Blood Sword to preserve his life. Such a perverted guy. I've never seen him before, but I'm working with him. Lin Shui was a little dazed. She was so shocked that she was a little dazed. Before she saw Ji Tianxing with her own eyes, she didn't feel so shocked. Now that she saw it with her own eyes, she felt like she was in a dream and didn't dare to believe it. A thought even flashed through her mind. Is it because the heavens care for me? Seeing that my fate is full of misfortune, they sent him to avenge me? Just as she was in a daze, a low and indifferent voice sounded in her mind. The Blood Sword is special. Only your Blood Sword can counter it. Lend me your Blood Sword, and I guarantee that you'll kill Lin Shan within 10 breaths. Without a doubt, the person who transmitted the voice was Ji Tianxing. Lin Shui immediately frowned and wanted to refuse. What kind of joke was this? The Blood Sword was passed down to her by her father, and she had long refined it into her natal divine weapon. This was the most important thing in her life. How could she lend it to a stranger? However, Lin Shui swallowed the words that she was about to blurt out. I guarantee that you'll kill Lin Shan within 10 breaths was too confident and domineering. It shocked her. For some reason, her right hand didn't listen to her and hit the blood sword into the ground. Swoosh. The blood sword turned into a red light and landed in front of Ji Tianxing. At this time, Ji Tianxing had already returned to his original appearance. He was holding the Burial of Heaven and fiercely attacking the blood sword. He held the blood sword in his left hand and the Burial of Heaven in his right hand. Burial of Heaven, lend me a hand. He used his divine soul to transmit his voice to the Burial of Heaven. Then, he clapped his palms together and combined the blood sword and the Burial of Heaven. Swoosh. At that moment, the blood sword emitted a bloody light that shot into the sky, and the Burial of Heaven burst forth with endless black light. The sword and the blade had strangely merged. Mobile version update website, M. Chapter 2989. Lin Shui was dumbfounded by this scene. Her eyes widened as she stared at the ground with her mouth agape. Her expression and eyes were filled with disbelief. He actually melted my blood blade? Shui Lin was a little absent-minded and felt her mind go blank. At the same time, the blood sword sect master was also shocked. He had already been heavily injured and was at the end of his rope. He was only able to block Ji Tianxing's ferocious attacks by relying on the blood sword's support and his all-out defense. But he knew very well that in at most an hour, his sword would be destroyed and he would die. Moreover, only the blood blade could counter the blood sword. These two supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifacts were originally a set, divided into yin and yang and male and female. The two complemented each other but also countered each other. Back then, in the hands of Divine Lord Wufa and his wife, this pair of swords could display their strongest power and was almost invincible. However, in the hands of Lin Shan and Lin Shui, the two swords became mortal enemies. Lin Shan was also a bit worried that Lin Shui would use the blood blade to counter him. If that happened, he would not even be able to last an hour and would die. In the end, what he was worried about really happened. What was even more shocking was that Lin Shui actually gave the blood blade to Ji Tianxing. And Ji Tianxing actually fused the blood blade with his divine sword. What kind of operation was this? Lin Shan was very confused and had a bad premonition. Not good. That kid wants to use the power of the blood blade to defeat my blood sword. This thought flashed through his mind, and Lin Shan did not dare to hold on anymore and ran without hesitation. Whoosh! The dark red blood sword turned into a bloody light and flew through the ground, escaping to the edge of the seven-colored light barrier. Obviously, Lin Shan wanted to get rid of Ji Tianxing and escape into the Bloodsword sect's battle formation. He wanted the experts of the Bloodsword sect to delay Ji Tianxing and Lin Shui to create a chance for him to escape. Winning or losing was no longer important. As long as he could escape the dragon blood-forbidden land and keep his life, it would be fortunate. This was Lin Shan's only thought. However, when the Burial of Heaven and the Blood Saber successfully merged, Ji Tianxing was destined to die the moment he made his move. Settle the 8 desolations. Ji Tianxing waved his left hand and pressed his palm into the ground. Instantly, the ground within a radius of several thousand miles was controlled and solidified. The incomparably strong resistance firmly suppressed the blood sword, causing it to be stuck in the underground rock stratum, unable to move. Then, Ji Tianxing held the sword of Burial of Heaven in his right hand and slashed with all his might. The appearance of the Burial of Heaven sword that had fused with the blood blade had undergone subtle changes. The blade of the sword was no longer perfectly straight. Instead, it was curved like a crescent moon, and shone even more coldly. A few scarlet veins could be seen on the pitch-black blade, as if fresh blood was flowing through them. This sword had become even more mysterious, and its power had also increased by 2 times. Boom! The black and red sword light sliced through the ground without any obstruction and hit the blood sword. Following a thunderous explosion, the blood sword was sent flying on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere, and a loud explosion shook the heavens. The destructive shockwave blasted a massive crater with a radius of tens of thousands of feet. This caused the ground within a radius of several thousand miles to tremble violently. The blood sword fell into the rock stratum, its blood light flickering unsteadily, and its aura becoming chaotic. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that a gap had appeared on the blade of the blood sword, and several cracks had extended from it. A powerful dragon blood divine power was rapidly dissipating. After suffering such a heavy blow, not only was the blood sword injured, Lin Shan's injuries were even more miserable. Even his divine soul was shaken to the point of dizziness, and his consciousness became hazy. Soon, he came back to his senses. Without hesitation, he drove the blood sword out of the ground and fled towards the south. This time, he had learned his lesson. Knowing that Ji Tianxing had grasped the laws of earth, he did not flee underground, and instead flew into the sky. However, this could not change the outcome. Ji Tianxing crossed 100 miles in one step, instantly catching up to the blood sword, and slashing down again. Duanren border. The burial of heaven's sword fell from the sky, and slashed down with a black and red sword 100 zhong long. This enormous sword light contained the aura of death unique to the burial of heaven's sword, and the unique yarrow power of the blood sword. The blood sword did its best to dodge the enormous sword, but it was too late. With another boom, a loud explosion shook the 9 heavens. The burial of heaven's sword slash was the same as the previous one, at the gap in the blade. The blood sword could no longer endure the wild power, and was cut in two. Crack! The blood sword broke in the middle, and dozens of dark red shards flew out. Dark red blood energy filled the sky. The 2 broken blades were sent flying, rolling and stabbing into the ground, trembling incessantly. After suffering such a heavy blow, the blood sword was almost destroyed. Lin Shan had been cut in half at the waist. His injuries were terrible, and his divine soul was even weaker. However, he did not give up. He was only a few dozen li away from the 7-colored light barrier in the south. Enduring his heavy injuries, he used his mind to control the 2 broken swords, and used all his strength to fly toward the 7-colored light barrier. As long as he passed through the light barrier, he would be able to enter the battlefield. At that time, with the cover of the experts of the Bloodsword sect, he would be able to escape. However, the 2 broken swords had just flown into the sky when Ji Tianxing attacked again. Heaven-piercing sword. With a low roar, he held the burial of heaven's sword with both hands, and used 120% of his strength to slash at the broken sword. Crack! Following a crisp cracking sound, the broken sword with a hilt was cut in half once again. The broken sword fell to the ground and was buried in the dust of the ruins. Ji Tianxing directly ignored the broken sword with the tip of the sword. Because he knew that Lin Shan was hiding in the hilt. As expected. The broken sword was cut in half again, and Lin Shan's injuries were even worse. He knew that it was impossible for him to escape with the broken sword. So, he escaped from the broken sword. He forced his battered body to turn into a streak of bloodlight and continued to flee to the south. Ji Tianxing had expected him to do this and was already prepared to wait for him. Lin Shan had just flown tens of thousands of meters when the burial of heaven's sword released a dazzling bloody light and slashed down. Bang! A deafening muffled sound suddenly exploded between the heavens and the earth, reverberating endlessly. Under the dark red bloody light, Lin Shan's broken divine body could be clearly seen being cut in half by the burial of heaven's sword. The 2 halves of the body couldn't withstand the violent power and actually exploded, splashing blood and debris into the sky. Lin Shan's divine body was destroyed, and he was seriously injured and on the verge of death. But his willpower was incomparably strong, and he still refused to give up struggling. Whoosh! A walnut-sized dark red divine spark flew out of the bloody rain and fled as fast as lightning. Ji Tianxing had already blocked in front of him, waiting for him to walk into the trap. He stretched out his left hand, and a golden heaven-capturing dragon claw directly grabbed Lin Shan's divine spark. At this point, the battle was over. Lin Shan fell into Ji Tianxing's hands, and his life and death were no longer in his control. Lin Shui watched the entire process dumbfoundedly, and the shock in her heart was indescribable. She silently calculated the time. It was exactly 10 breath. Chapter 2990. From the fusion of the burial of heaven's sword and the blood blade to Ji Tianxing killing Lin Shan and capturing his godhead. The process was very intense and thrilling. It sounded long, but in reality, it was only 10 breaths of time. Ji Tianxing was a man of his word, and he did as he said. From the beginning to the end, Lin Shui was in shock and witnessed the entire process with her own eyes. She couldn't help and only watched the entire battle. She didn't have the opportunity to attack and was so shocked that she forgot to help. This made her feel a little embarrassed. I'm a high divine lord after all. Even if I can't beat you and Lin Shan, I'm qualified to interfere in this battle and help. And the result? You only used 10 breaths of time to finish off Lin Shan. Wouldn't it be stupid for me to become a spectator? Thinking of this, Lin Shui frowned and was very unhappy. However, another thought occurred to her. Although I didn't help, I lent you my life artifact. You being able to get rid of Lin Shan is also thanks to me. Moreover, my original intention of establishing the Bloodblade sect and my unchanging belief for 1,000 years is to kill Lin Shan and take revenge. Now that I've taken revenge, I should be happy. Shui Lin's brows relaxed. Suddenly, the sky cleared up and she was filled with joy. Swoosh. She hurriedly flew across the sky and came to Ji Tianxing's side, looking at his left hand expectantly. Lin Shan isn't dead yet, right? Where's his godhead? Ji Tianxing held the burial of heaven's sword in his right hand and held it behind his back. His left hand clenched into a fist and slowly stretched out in front of Lin Shui. After spreading out his 5 fingers, a dark red godhead appeared in his palm. It was Lin Shan. However, Lin Shan's godhead was dim and his divine power was weak. Its surface was covered with cracks. Just now, Ji Tianxing grabbed his godhead and crushed it a few times, resulting in this result. Now, Lin Shan's soul was almost shattered and he was in a coma. He wouldn't wake up in a short period of time. I'm sorry, I destroyed his body and only captured his godhead. If we can capture him in one piece and hand him over to you, then we will have completed our mission. Ji Tianxing said calmly and handed the godhead to Shui Lin. I'll leave his godhood to you. After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. Shui Lin stretched out her hands and held Lin Shan's godhead, standing there in a daze. She should have been overjoyed and relieved of a heavy burden. But for some reason, her attention wasn't on Lin Shan's godhead. She was actually staring at Ji Tianxing's back. This brat is so young, yet he already has such powerful strength. He's simply unfathomable. Moreover, he was so decisive and cold in his actions, and there was also an indescribable mysterious temperament. Who knows how many innocent young girls will be captivated by him? Shui Lin's eyes were unfocused as she watched him leave. These thoughts flashed through her mind and she couldn't help but sigh. After a while, she came back to her senses and frowned. Bah! You old witch, what nonsense are you thinking about? Shui Lin was a little ashamed, her cheeks inexplicably hot. She thought that she was a bloodthirsty and heartless witch who had long lost her feelings. Who knew that she would actually have such messy thoughts just now? Although she didn't have any thoughts of crossing the line, the appearance of these 7 emotions and 6 desires made her feel even more ashamed. She lowered her head and glanced at Lin Shan's godhead. She clenched her fists and put it into the interspatial ring. When she raised her head again, her eyes and temperament had already returned to coldness and indifference. Hey! Wait! Shui Lin looked at Ji Tianxing's back and shouted loudly. 30 miles away, Ji Tianxing, who was walking on air, stopped. Without turning his head, he asked in an indifferent tone, "What else?" Shui Lin's figure flashed and teleported 30 miles, appearing in front of him. She frowned and stared at him, asking with an unhappy expression, "You said that you would only borrow my blood knife. Now that you've used it, shouldn't you return the blood knife?" This was serious business, he absolutely couldn't forget. He had to give an explanation. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a calm expression, "You saw it just now, your blood knife has already merged with my divine sword." Shui Lin's brows furrowed even tighter. She secretly clenched her fists in anger and shouted, "Then you mean, you can't return it?" Ji Tianxing thought about it seriously and nodded. "That seems to be the case." Shui Lin snorted and said even more angrily, "That's the divine knife my father passed down to me, the natal divine weapon that he cultivated with his life. You didn't give me a heads up and just merged it, you have to compensate me." Ji Tianxing blinked and said very honestly, "I told you that I wanted to borrow your blood knife. You only gave it to me after you agreed, didn't you?" You. Lin choked and glared at him. I thought you only wanted to use it for a while. Who knew that you would use it all? Ji Tianxing spread his hands, expressing helplessness. Lin wrinkled her nose and said fiercely, don't try to cheat, you have to think of a way to compensate me. Ji Tianxing thought for a while and pointed at her hand and the ruins not far away. He said, Lin Shan's godhead will be your compensation. If you think it's not enough, there are 3 pieces of the sword in the ruins. You can think of a way to put them back together, they should still be usable. This. Lin was startled, thinking that this result was not unacceptable. In fact, as long as she could kill Lin Shan and take revenge, even if she had to sacrifice the blood knife and the entire blood knife sect, she would have no regrets. However, she just couldn't stand Ji Tianxing's behavior. He was cold and arrogant, as if everything was right. This made her very unhappy. Seeing that she was silent, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, if there's no problem, then I'll leave? Lin frowned and didn't answer. Ji Tianxing asked again, I'm really leaving? Lin glared at him and waved her hand, forget it, I'm not going to bicker with a little guy like you. You can go. However, don't announce Lin Shan's defeat for now. Otherwise, those dogs of the Bloodsword sect will definitely scatter and flee, and I won't be able to catch them all in one fell swoop. Ji Tianxing was a little surprised and asked with a playful smile, oh? Weren't you very angry just now and insisting that I compensate you? Why are you suddenly so open-minded and willing to let me go? Lin glanced at him and said with a sad expression, originally, I founded the Blood Knife sect to deal with the Bloodsword sect and kill that bastard Lin Shan. Now that both the Bloodsword sect and Lin Shan have been destroyed, I have no more regrets. As for the blood knife and sword, they're just worldly possessions. If they're gone, then so be it. After today's battle, I have no more worries and can retire with peace of mind. Ji Tianxing rubbed his nose and suddenly revealed a mischievous smile. Sorry, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. As he spoke, he flipped his right hand and a bloody light flashed in his palm. Lin's crescent moon-like blood knife appeared in his palm in perfect condition. Losing the blood knife and recovering it, Lin glared at Ji Tianxing angrily. You brat! You dare to trick me! Chapter 2991. Lin Shui was furious. In just a short while, her emotions fluctuated. She glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing, having the urge to strangle him. She thought the blood blade was still there, but it was gone. She thought it was gone and comforted herself. In the end, the blood blade appeared again. Wasn't this a deliberate prank? Ji Tianxing looked at her with a smile and said sincerely, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I just wanted to see if you're as obsessed and bloodthirsty as the legends say. And the result? Lin Shui glanced at him, still not giving him a good look. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, the result is obvious. You're obsessed, but you haven't become a demon. You're just a poor woman with a deep blood feud. This was a very fair evaluation. For nearly 1,000 years, Lin Shui lived only for revenge, and her obsession was deep in her bones. However, she only hated the Bloodsword sect and Lin Shan, not bloodthirsty and cruel. But Ji Tianxing's words stimulated Lin Shui's nerves. Like a cat with its hair standing on end, she glared at Ji Tianxing and snapped, what did you just say? Just a poor woman with a deep blood feud. That's it. Little brat. How old are you? Don't pretend to be deep in front of me. I've killed more people than you've seen. Lin Shui put away the blood blade and glared at Ji Tianxing angrily with her hands on her hips. She looked like she was teaching a junior a lesson. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianxing suddenly wanted to laugh. Forget it, I won't bicker with you. He shook his head, chuckled, and turned to leave. Lin Shui was even angrier at his attitude. She followed him and shouted, what do you mean? What's with that expression? Is it disdain? Are you looking down on me? Don't think that you're mysterious and amazing just because you're young and strong. Don't think that I'll be grateful to you and give myself to you just because you helped me take revenge. Stop right there, I'm going to teach you a lesson today and make you understand something. Although you are a monster, a genius, and an outstanding person, you have to understand the basic manners of a person, and you can't look down on women. Lin Shui followed Ji Tianxing all the way to the edge of the array. Ji Tianxing felt a headache coming on. He quickly changed the topic and said seriously, "There's still fighting outside. The Bloodblade sect's disciples won't be able to hold on much longer." The people of the Bloodsword sect didn't know what had happened inside the Grand Formation, nor did they know that Lin Shan had already been defeated. "I can't show myself. Otherwise, when they guess that Lin Shan is defeated, they will scatter. How about this? I'll leave while you go and kill the remaining members of the Bloodsword sect. If there's anything else, just send me a message." After hurriedly giving out instructions, he passed through the 7-colored light barrier and left the grand array without looking back. Sure enough, the battle was still going on in the forbidden area outside the formation. The Bloodsword sect had the upper hand, and more than 4,000 people were attacking the Bloodblade sect. The people of the Bloodblade sect held on bitterly, and their numbers continued to dwindle. Ji Tianxing used the armillary heaven secret art, entered a state of invisibility, and flew toward the south. Lin Shui followed him out of the grand array. Without looking at the battlefield, she hurriedly sent a message to him: "The battle is about to end." "Where are you going?" Ji Tianxing flew through the sky without looking back and replied, "I'm going to the royal capital to take care of business." Lin Shui frowned and asked somewhat unwillingly, "You've helped this old lady so much. This old lady must properly thank you and reward you with treasures and wealth. Can't you stay a few more days and come back to the Bloodblade sect with this old lady?" This time, Ji Tianxing did not reply. He had already flown far away. Lin Shui stood in place and looked toward the southern horizon, stomping her feet in annoyance. "Humph! You don't know what's good for you. This old lady was planning to give you half of the Bloodblade sect, but you don't want it. Don't think that just because this old lady is indebted to you, this old lady will pester you and repay you." She muttered angrily, but no one could hear her. Suppressing her anger, she looked at the nearby battlefield and immediately erupted with a frightening killing intent. "Bastards of the Bloodblade sect, all of you must die." Lin Shui roared with killing intent. Dragging the long and narrow blood blade with both hands, she charged into the battlefield like a streak of blood-colored light. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Blade light filled the sky and a blood-colored hurricane swept out. Several dozen experts of the Bloodblade sect were immediately dismembered by the bloody hurricane, turning into a rain of blood and flesh. When this bloodblade which entered the battlefield, the end of the Bloodblade sect had arrived. An entire hour later, the battle in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land finally came to an end. The result was without suspense. More than 4,000 experts of the Bloodblade sect and more than 20 divine lords had all died in battle. The land within a radius of thousands of miles was covered in broken limbs and blood. There were also fragments of treasure ships, weapons, and armor. The Forbidden Land was a scene of desolation, with deep pits and ravines everywhere. The bloody light and bloody mist that blotted out the sky lasted for 3 days before dispersing. After the battle ended, Lin Shui returned to her ship to rest. After killing more than 1,000 people, her body was filled with a terrifying stench of blood, as if she was a god of death. The guards in the hall were all extremely respectful to her. 15 minutes passed. Left Envoy Jin, who was in charge of checking the battle results, returned to the hall and reported to Lin Shui. "Congratulations, sect leader. Congratulations, sect leader. Our sect obtained a complete victory in this battle and killed nearly 5,000 experts of the Bloodblade sect, including 23 divine lords. Only one Sir God and more than 50 experts managed to escape in the chaos with heavy injuries. However, the Blood Dragon Right Envoy has already led people to pursue them. I believe that there will be good news soon. At that time, the remnants of the Bloodblade sect will all be wiped out. After this battle, not only will we be able to avenge you, but our sect will also replace the Bloodblade sect as the 5th great sect." Lin Shui calmly listened to his report. She only paid attention to the first half of the report and was not interested in the second half. "How are the casualties of our sect?" Left Envoy Jin was startled for a moment before he lowered his head and replied, "Reporting to Sect Master, the number of our disciples is 5 times less than the Bloodblade sect. Therefore, the casualties of our sect are slightly greater. More than 160 elite disciples died in battle, and more than 600 experts died in battle. Even out of the 18 Sir Gods, 7 of them had perished. However, their sacrifice was worth it to successfully exterminate the Bloodblade sect. Lin Shui nodded slightly and ordered, "Left Envoy Jin, you are in charge of the rewards of the meritorious disciples and the compensation of the injured disciples. According to the sect's previous rules, give the meritorious disciples and the injured disciples 10 times the reward and compensation." 10 times? Left Envoy Jin was stunned and his eyes widened in disbelief. The rules of the Bloodblade sect were very humane and valued friendship. If an elite disciple died in battle, his family would receive 5 million godstones as compensation. If it was 10 times the compensation, it would be 50 million godstones. Left Envoy Jin's heart twitched and his hands trembled. He wanted to howl in grief. "Sect Master, even if you have taken revenge and are in a good mood, you can't be so willful. With 10 times the compensation, our sect's treasury will be emptied and we will soon go bankrupt." Mobile version update website, M.